Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dreams of Drift. Here on this channel, I shares UFO sightings, alien encounters, and relaxing space stories off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. Close the door on the noise of the day, lower the lights if you like, and let yourself settle in. You've just stepped into Black Vault Secrets, a place where the strangest government files are read aloud in the gentlest possible voice, so you can listen wide awake with wonder, or simply drift away whenever sleep calls. For over 25 years, one researcher has been quietly unlocking what governments try to hide. His name is John Greenewald Jr., and when he was just 15, he decided the public deserved to see the papers marked classified, secret, and eyes only. Armed only with the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, a humble 1966 law that says any citizen can ask for almost any record, John began mailing and later emailing requests to the CIA, the FBI, the Air Force, the NSA, every agency that ever whispered about things that fly in ways they shouldn't or vanish without trace. Thousands upon thousands of pages later, those answers now live in one place. The Black Vault, the largest private online archive of declassified documents in the world. Every file you'll hear in this series is real. Many still carry the faint creases of once being folded in a secure drawer, the smudged stamps that say top secret now crossed out in heavy black marker because the law finally forced them into daylight. You can pause this video anytime. Visit the Black Vault yourself, type in the case number we mentioned, and hold the exact same pages in your hands. Tonight is our very first journey together, and we're going to ease into it with 10 extraordinary cases pulled straight from those yellowed folders. We'll meet pilots who chased glowing discs over the Capitol, families warned by men in black suits who seemed to know far too much, radar operators who watched impossible objects drop from 50,000 feet to sea level in seconds, and lonely ranchers who found strange metal that remembers its shape. Nothing here is made up. Nothing is exaggerated. Just calm, measured readings of what the government once kept to itself. So find your favorite blanket, rest your head back, and let the room grow quiet. There's no rush. The stories will still be here if you wake up later, or if you simply listen with half-closed eyes while your thoughts wander. Some people play these episodes to fall asleep. Others stay wide-eyed until the end. Either way is perfect. Breathe in slowly and out. For over a quarter century, one determined researcher has been quietly forcing the government to open doors it never wanted opened. And tonight, we're stepping through 10 of them together. You're safe here. You're among friends who also look up at the sky and wonder. Let's begin. Imagine it's 1996. The internet is still mostly beige and humming dial-up tones. A 15-year-old kid in California decides he wants to read the government's secret files on UFOs. Not tomorrow, not when he's older, right now. Most adults would have laughed and closed the door. John Greenewald Jr. didn't have a door to close. He had a computer, a printer, and a copy of the Freedom of Information Act. That year he created a simple website and called it the Black Vault. The name was half joke, half promise. A digital vault that would hold everything the government wanted kept in the dark. What started as a few hundred scanned pages sitting on a noisy home server has, almost 30 years later, become the largest civilian archive of declassified documents on Earth. As of tonight, more than 3 million pages live there. CIA, FBI, NSA, DIA, Department of Defense, even the Department of Energy. Files on remote viewing experiments, crashed discs in New Mexico, psychic research funded during the Cold War, and thousands of raw UFO reports written by generals, pilots, and scientists who never thought the public would see their words. Every single page arrived the same way. John writes a letter or, these days, an electronic FOIA request that says, in polite but firm language, please send me everything you have on Project X, or Case Y, or the incident over Tehran in 1976. The law gives the agency 20 business days to answer. Sometimes they comply quickly. Sometimes they stall for years. Sometimes they send a single sheet with everything blacked out except the words "the" and. John appeals, refines the request, tries another agency, waits, and waits some more. When the envelopes finally arrive, sometimes thin, sometimes thick enough to need a hand truck, he scans every page at high resolution, uploads it, and indexes it so anyone with an internet connection can read the exact same document the director of the CIA once held. You don't need a security clearance. You don't need to know someone in Washington. You just need curiosity and the willingness to wait. That's the quiet power of FOIA. It's slow, it's frustrating, and it's one of the most beautiful things about living in an open society. Governments hate it because sunshine is the best disinfectant, and the Black Vault is basically a lifelong disinfection project. Authentication is simple but ironclad. Every document carries official markings, letterhead from the agency, case numbers, dates, distribution lists, declassification stamps, even the occasional coffee ring or handwritten note in the margin that says the secretary wants to see this. When an agency releases a file, they are legally admitting it is genuine. John never alters a page. If a paragraph is redacted, you see the black bar exactly where the censor placed it. If a report is missing pages, he notes the gap. What you read is what the government finally surrendered. Why does any of this matter? Because memory is short and official stories change. In 1947, the Army Air Forces said a flying disc crashed outside Roswell, then changed it to a weather balloon the next day. In 1969, the Air Force closed Project Blue Book and announced there was nothing to see. In 2017, the Pentagon quietly admitted a secret UFO program had been running for years. Each shift leaves ordinary people wondering what was true and when. The Black Vault freezes those moments in time. It lets you hold the original memo, read the general's actual words, and decide for yourself instead of trusting whatever version is convenient this decade. The archive has grown so large that universities, journalists, historians, and even congressional staff use it daily. Major news networks have broken stories because a document surfaced there first. Scientists writing peer-reviewed papers cite it. Yet the site remains free, ad-free, and open to everyone. No paywall, no subscription, just the raw evidence, waiting quietly for anyone who wants to look. Tonight we're going to do something special. We're going to walk straight into that vault, pull 10 files that still make the hairs on the back of the neck stand up, and read them slowly, word for word, the way they were written when no one thought we'd ever hear them. No dramatic music stings, no breathless narration, just the calm turning of pages that were supposed to stay closed forever. So breathe easy. The truth doesn't shout. It waits patiently in manila folders and faded ink, ready for the moment someone finally asks to see it. Tonight, we open 10 files that reveal encounters beyond explanation. Before we open the first file, let's pause for a moment and talk about what declassified actually means, because the word gets thrown around a lot, and it matters how we understand it. When a document is stamped declassified, it doesn't mean someone in a back room decided the public deserved the truth out of the goodness of their heart. It means a law or an executive order forced the government to release it. Most of the pages you'll hear tonight were pried loose by FOIA requests, appeals, and sometimes lawsuits. They spent decades locked away because an agency believed their release would cause damage to national security. The fact that they're now in our hands simply means that, at some point, the calculated risk of keeping them secret became higher than the risk of letting them go. The witnesses in these reports are not random civilians on a hillside with a phone camera. They are Air Force pilots with thousands of flight hours, radar operators trained to tell a flock of geese from an unknown target, air traffic controllers whose voices you hear on every commercial flight, and senior officers who knew that filing a false report could end their careers. When a colonel writes that he chased an object performing maneuvers no known aircraft could survive, he is putting his pension and his reputation on the line. These are not people prone to exaggeration. Radar data appears in many of the cases we'll explore. In the 1950s and 60s, ground radars and airborne radars often tracked the same object simultaneously, a detail that is very hard to dismiss as weather or illusion. When a pilot says, "It's right in front of me, glowing orange," and the radar operator 50 miles away says, "I have it at your 12 o'clock, speed fluctuating between 100 and 4,000 knots. Something physical is being detected by separate systems. That convergence of visual and electronic evidence is why certain cases refuse to fade away. Every incident we'll discuss went through official investigation channels. The Air Defense Command, Project Blue Book, the 4602nd Air Intelligence Service Squadron, or later the Aerospace Defense Command. Reports were written on standardized forms, routed up the chain, and often forwarded to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for analysis. Many carry handwritten notes from intelligence officers asking pointed questions. Can we explain this? Does RAND have anything similar? Recommend further surveillance. These are not casual memos. They are the military's own attempt to understand what it was dealing with. You'll notice black bars on some pages. Redactions remain for three main reasons: sources and methods still in use, names of personnel who are still protected, or references to technology the government simply refuses to acknowledge even decades later. A single line blacked out does not invalidate the other 20 pages. It usually just means someone, somewhere, still feels uncomfortable. Finally, there is a pattern you'll see repeated across 70 years. Immediate public dismissal followed, years later, by quiet admission. Roswell, 1947. Captured flying disc becomes weather balloon. Then in 1994 becomes high-altitude balloon with crash dummies. Project Blue Book closes in 1969 with the conclusion that no UFO represented a threat or advanced technology. In 2017, the Pentagon confirms the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program had been studying exactly that. The pattern is so consistent it has a name in FOIA circles: deny, then disclose when nobody's looking. None of this proves little green men are circling the planet. It simply proves that trained observers using million-dollar equipment recorded events they could not explain, that their superiors took those events seriously enough to investigate, and that the explanations offered to the public rarely matched the internal paperwork. That gap, between what was said out loud and what was written in confidence, is where we'll be spending the next few hours. The evidence isn't perfect. It never is. But it is real, it is primary, and it is finally ours to read. Let's turn to the first file. Settle in. Dim the lights. As we journey through these 10 encounters, there's no need to stay alert, no need to take notes, no need to solve anything tonight. This series was made for the quiet hours, for those moments when the house is still and your thoughts can wander without hurry. Everything you're about to hear will move gently. Each case unfolds slowly, the way a bedtime story should. One calm sentence following another, soft pauses between pages, and long, easy breaths of silence whenever the documents themselves fall quiet. There are no sudden musical stings, no dramatic whispers, no voices rising in excitement. Just the low, steady rhythm of reading, like waves on a nighttime shore. If your eyes grow heavy 10 minutes in, that's perfect. If you drift away during the third case and wake up near the end, that's perfect too. The mysteries will still be here tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. In the description below, you'll find gentle timestamps for each story, so you can return anytime and pick up exactly where sleep carried you off. Let the words wash over you the way distant thunder does on a summer night. Present enough to feel, soft enough to ignore whenever you choose. Some listeners keep these episodes on a loop all night long. Others play one case and let the quiet do the rest. Either way, the room stays safe, the voice stays low, and nothing will ever jolt you awake. Feel the pillow beneath your head. Notice the weight of the blanket. Let your shoulders loosen, your hands rest wherever they fall. There's nothing to figure out right now. The files have waited 50, 60, 70 years. They can wait a little longer while you exhale the day. If a question drifts into your mind, what were those lights over Washington? Who were the men who visited that farmer? Simply let it float there, unanswered, the way you might watch a slow cloud cross the moon. Answers may come later, or they may not. Both possibilities are welcome here. Whenever you're ready, close your eyes or leave them half open, whichever feels better. The stories are patient. They'll speak whether you're listening with your whole mind or only the quiet edge of a dream. Take one slow breath in and an even slower one out. You're in the perfect place. Nothing is required of you now except to be exactly as you are. Tired, curious, comfortable, drifting. The first file is waiting, but it isn't impatient. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin. July 14th, 2019. The sun has slipped below the horizon, leaving only a thin copper line where the Pacific meets the sky. 130 miles southwest of Los Angeles, the ocean spreads out like dark glass, barely breathing. The air is warm, almost heavy, the kind of summer night that makes the water feel closer than it really is. On that quiet water floats the USS Kidd, DDG 100, a sleek Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, 9,000 tons of steel and radar dishes gliding at a relaxed 12 knots. Her gray hull blends into the dusk so well that from a distance, she looks more like a shadow than a ship. This stretch of ocean belongs to the Navy's Southern California operating areas, a vast checkerboard of warning zones where civilian boats rarely wander after dark. Tonight the Kidd is here for routine workups, helicopter ops, radar calibration, the ordinary heartbeat of a warship keeping its skills sharp between deployments. Most of the crew are finishing dinner or settling into the evening watch. The flight deck aft is empty except for the soft glow of red deck lights. Forward, the bridge windows reflect the faint green and amber of radar screens. Nothing feels urgent. The sea state is almost flat, wind barely 5 knots. Visibility down to a hazy 4 or 5 miles because of the warm marine layer drifting in from the coast. At 21:20 Pacific time, the officer of the deck glances up from the center console and notices 2 steady white lights hovering several hundred feet above the ship, just off the starboard side. They are not aircraft on approach. There are no scheduled flights tonight. They are not stars. They move together, slow and deliberate. He reaches for the logbook and writes the first entry of what will become a very long night. 2,120 to 2 UAS spotted over flight deck. The pen pauses for half a second, then keeps writing. The ocean stays calm. The warm evening air keeps drifting across the deck. And somewhere above the quiet destroyer, the first pair of unknown lights begins a visit no training manual ever prepared anyone for. By 2200 hours, the evening had shifted from quiet routine to something no one on the bridge wanted to name out loud. The 2 original lights had been joined by 4 more, then 6, then 9. They moved in loose groups, never colliding, never drifting apart the way hobby drones do when their pilots lose interest. These stayed in perfect station, holding between 200 and 400 feet above the sea. Close enough that the watchstanders could see steady white illumination with occasional red or green flashes underneath. Word traveled fast across the secure voice nets. 100 miles to the southeast, USS John Finn reported the same cluster mirroring her course. Farther north, USS Rafael Peralta logged identical lights pacing her at identical speed. 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers, spread across dozens of miles of ocean, were all looking at the same phenomenon at the same moment. Whatever these objects were, they were coordinating. On the Kidd, the captain ordered the SNOPI team to the bridge. Snoopy, ship's nautical or otherwise photogenic intelligence exploitation. Sounds almost playful, but it is simply the handful of sailors trained to grab night vision cameras and long lenses the second something unusual appears. Within minutes, they were on the port bridge wing, green glow of infrared screens reflecting off their faces as they tried to bring the nearest light into focus. The objects refused to resolve into anything familiar. No wings, no rotors, no navigation strobes in the correct sequence. Just smooth, silent movement. The drones, if that is what they were not simply hovering. They matched the Kidd's every turn. When the destroyer increased speed to 20 knots, the lights accelerated without hesitation. When the helm brought her hard left to shake them, The entire group slid sideways in perfect formation, maintaining relative position like they were tethered by invisible lines. Radar operators below decks watched the spy. One screens paint multiple contacts, then lose them, then paint them again as the objects climbed or dropped 100 feet in the space of a heartbeat. By 22:30, the count had climbed to at least 9 separate objects around the Kidd alone. Some approached within 300 yards, close enough for the bridge watch to make out a faint, steady hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. No one heard rotor noise. No one saw prop wash disturbing the water below. The objects simply held position, patient, curious, almost polite. Across the circuit, John Finn and Rafael Peralta reported identical behavior. The same number of lights, the same effortless pacing, the same refusal to answer radio challenges on guard frequency or civilian marine bands. The three ships were now linked by something that moved faster and more smoothly than anything in the Navy's own drone inventory. For the next 90 minutes, something impossible was happening across a wide stretch of the Pacific. Unknown craft, in coordinated groups, were studying some of the most advanced warships on Earth, and the warships had no idea what they were looking at. The logbooks kept filling, the cameras kept rolling, and the warm July night stretched on, quiet except for the soft click of camera shutters and the occasional low whisper. "They're still with us." Let us now turn to the raw data that anchors this incident in verifiable fact. The primary source is Freedom of Information Act case number 2021-9227, a request submitted to the U.S. Navy for deck logs and related records from July 2019. Released in stages between 2021 and 2022, these documents, totaling hundreds of pages, include handwritten and typed entries from the ship's official logs, internal emails, and sensor readouts. They were obtained by investigative journalists at the war zone, who cross-referenced them with Automatic Identification System, AIS, ship tracking data to map the events precisely. No interpretations here, just the timestamps, positions, and measurements as recorded by personnel on duty. The sequence begins on the USS Kidd's deck log for July 14, 2019. At 21:20 local time, 10:20 p.m., the entry reads, 2 UAS spotted over flight deck. UAS, Unmanned Aerial Systems, is the Navy's neutral term for drones or unidentified objects. The log notes their position, bearing 090 relative, approximately 500 yards off the starboard bow, altitude estimated at 300 feet via optical sighting. The Kidd was steaming at 12 knots on course 270, position 32 degrees 45 minutes north, 120 degrees 15 minutes west, roughly 110 nautical miles west-southwest of Point Mugu. By 21:30, the count rose to 4 objects. Log entry: additional 2 UAS sighted, maintaining station astern. Snoopy team deployed. The shipboard nautical or otherwise photographic intelligence exploitation team activated infrared and visible light cameras, capturing footage of steady white lights with intermittent red strobes. No audio signatures were noted, no propeller whine, no engine hum detectable above sea state 2 ambient noise. At 21:45, the captain ordered River City Condition 2, a communications lockdown protocol under Emission Control (EMCON) directives. This restricts all non-essential radio traffic to prevent signal interception, switching to encrypted channels only. The log states, River City 2 set. All non-tactical emissions minimized. This measure, drawn from Comtinst M16247.3b, signals elevated threat posture without escalating to weapons-free status. It remained in effect for 2 hours and 15 minutes, until midnight on July 15th, when the log notes, UES contacts lost. River City 2 secured. Radar data, declassified in the same FOIA batch and analyzed by the war zone, provides the most objective layer. The Kidds and /spy 1D phased array radar, capable of tracking over 100 targets simultaneously, painted intermittent returns on 5 distinct contacts. Time position plots show the objects holding 200 to 500 feet above mean sea level, derived from altitude-corrected returns cross-checked with the ship's Link 16 data link. One track, designated Sierra 03, executed a 180-degree turn in 12 seconds while pacing the Kidd at 16 knots, matching the destroyer's speed exactly, as confirmed by Doppler shift analysis. Lateral acceleration peaked at 2.5 gs, far exceeding commercial quadcopters, but within speculative military-grade tolerances. The swarm was not isolated to the Kidd. At least 5 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers reported synchronized activity. USS John Finn, DDG-113, logged 2 UAS at 21:35 from position 32 degrees 50 minutes north, 120 degrees 10 minutes west. USS Rafael Peralta, DDG-115, noted 4 at 21:40, including 1 white light hovering over flight deck at 200 feet. USS Russell, DDG-59, confirmed 3 at 22:10 during a formation maneuver, and USS Paul Hamilton, DDG-60, tracked 6 by 22:45, with 1 descending to 150 feet before climbing to over 500 feet in under 30 seconds. A 5th vessel, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser USS Bunker Hill, CG-52, observed up to 11 contacts on July 30th, per supplemental logs. The primary event on July 14th to 15th spanned nearly 3 hours, from 21:20 to 0:10, with objects reappearing sporadically until 23:50. Speed estimates varied. Visual pacing at 12 to 16 knots during straight-line runs, but radar locks showed bursts to 40 to 50 knots during maneuvers, covering 1.2 nautical miles in 90 seconds. Altitudes fluctuated between 200 and 500 plus feet, dipping low enough to trigger proximity alarms on the Peralta's flight deck, but never penetrating restricted airspace below 100 feet. These details, timestamps synced to Zulu time, latitudes, longitudes in decimal degrees, speeds in knots, altitudes in feet, form a chain of custody unbroken by speculation. The FOIA release includes chain of custody forms, signed by the commanding officers, attesting to the log's authenticity under 5 U.S.C. Section 552. No evidence of spoofing or malfunction appears. Cross-ship correlations via tactical data links confirm the contacts were external and coherent. Yet the files end abruptly, redacted sections hinting at follow-on analysis forwarded to Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific. What the radars saw, the cameras glimpsed, and the logs captured remains, as of this reading, unexplained. When the last light vanished shortly after midnight, the questions began stacking faster than answers. At 0:15 on July 15th, the Kidd's Combat Information Center sent a flash priority message up the chain. Multiple unknown aerial systems had shadowed a U.S. warship for nearly 3 hours with no identification, no flight plan, and no detectable origin. Within minutes, the Coast Guard cutter Narwhal, stationed out of San Diego, was ordered to conduct a full sector search for any surface vessel that might have launched drones. Helicopters lifted off from Point Mugu with forward-looking infrared pods sweeping the sea. They found nothing. No fishing boats, no private yachts, no suspicious container ships. The nearest civilian traffic was the Carnival Imagination cruise ship, more than 30 nautical miles away and traveling in the opposite direction. Passengers on her upper decks later told reporters they had seen clusters of white lights dancing over the horizon around 10:30 p.m., lights that moved in ways no passenger drone fleet could manage. Carnival's own security footage, quietly obtained months later, shows excited guests pointing phones toward the southwest, exactly the bearing of the Navy task group. By dawn, the incident had been classified as a possible counterintelligence intrusion. That phrase appears in redacted emails released under the same FOIA batch. The objects were not treated as lost hobbyists or curious filmmakers. They were logged as potential probes by an adversary sophisticated enough to operate dozens of platforms simultaneously, at night, over water, without emitting normal radio or ADSB signatures. Naval Criminal Investigative Service opened a file. The Office of Naval Intelligence requested all SNOPI imagery and radar tapes. A terse message from 3rd Fleet read simply, "Escalate to Indopacom." The July 14th event was not isolated. The very next night, July 15th, USS Rafael Peralta reported another group, 6 lights this time, pacing her for 90 minutes. 10 days later, on July 25th, USS Russell logged 5 objects performing identical maneuvers. Then on July 30th, the swarm returned in force around USS Bunker Hill, with the cruiser's log counting up to 11 separate contacts weaving through restricted airspace. Each incident followed the same pattern: silent approach, perfect station keeping, sudden disappearance when challenged by helicopter searchlights. No launch platforms were ever located. No radio chatter intercepted. No debris recovered. The Coast Guard's after-action summary, reluctantly released in 2022, states plainly, no vessels or aircraft identified as possible source of U.S. activity. The Navy's own preliminary report ends with a single line that still echoes in FOIA circles. Origin and intent of aerial phenomena remain unknown. The file's close there. Whatever conclusions were reached in classified channels have not been released. What began as a warm, routine summer night off California quietly became one of the best documented modern encounters between cutting-edge warships and something that refused to obey any known rules of flight. Years later, the incident still sits quietly in a folder marked Unresolved U.S. Activity. In 2021, when Congress first asked pointed questions about unidentified aerial phenomena, Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Michael Gilday was direct. We have not identified the craft involved in the 2019 incidents off Southern California. No hedging, no weather balloons, no lost party drones. Just an honest admission from the Navy's highest uniformed officer. What troubles the analysts most is simple endurance. The objects operated continuously for nearly 3 hours, some returning on multiple nights across weeks. Even the most advanced military drones in 2019, MQ-4C Triton, RQ-4 Global Hawk, or classified programs, require refueling, battery swaps, or line-of-sight control. These lights needed none of that. They simply stayed aloft, perfectly coordinated, over black water far from any shore. Then there is the formation discipline. 9, sometimes 11 objects moved as one organism, holding diamond patterns, sliding sideways in unison, matching every course change of 9,000-ton destroyers without a single collision or drift. No commercial drone swarm in 2019 could do that over open ocean, at night, beyond radio range of any controller. No hobbyist fleet could coordinate across 5 warships spread over 100 miles. The Navy quietly checked its own calendars. No scheduled testing matched the dates or descriptions. No contractors were flying experimental platforms in those warning areas. The Pentagon's own All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, years later, reviewed the radar tapes and SNOPI footage and placed the incidents in the same unidentified column as the famous 2004 Nimitz encounters. FBI and NCIS opened parallel investigations. They interviewed crew members, examined phone footage, searched for any hint of foreign intelligence involvement. Every trail ended in the same place. Nothing. No launch vessel, no anomalous radio emissions, no recovered debris, no explanation that satisfied the engineers who measured the performance. The final briefing slide, partially declassified in 2023, lists the characteristics in plain bullet points. Sustained flight exceeding known battery or fuel limits, instantaneous acceleration without sonic signature, transmedium capability suggested by rapid altitude changes, no propulsion signatures. Thermal, acoustic, or electromagnetic, coordinated multi-platform behavior beyond current U.S. capability. Below the bullets, a single line in smaller font. Origin unknown. Some nights, sailors still talk about it in low voices on the mess decks. Others simply look up when the ship steams through those same waters, half expecting the lights to return. They never have, at least not in any log that's been released. The Pacific swallowed its secrets that July, the way it has swallowed so many others. And somewhere on the far side of the country, another set of files was waiting for daylight. As the Pacific swallowed its secrets, we turn to a different coast. March 16, 1967. Central Montana is still locked in the last grip of winter. The high plains stretch out in every direction, pale gold grass under a thin crust of snow, broken only by lonely county roads and the occasional cluster of cattle huddled against the wind. Here and there, low concrete buildings sit half buried in the earth like strange monuments, each one guarding a steel lid that covers a shaft plunging 200 feet straight down. One of those shafts belongs to Echo Flight, Launch Control Facility E-1, 341st Strategic Missile Wing, Malmstrom Air Force Base. Deep beneath the prairie, in a reinforced capsule the size of a small house trailer suspended on giant shock absorbers, two young Air Force officers are finishing the night shift. Captain Eric Carlson, the commander, and First Lieutenant Walter Figgle, his deputy, sit side by side in front of a console that looks like something from a science fiction film. Rows of lights, switches, and two red key slots that can, together with four other capsules, end civilization in 30 minutes. Above them, spread across a 70-mile arc of empty land, lie 10 Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missiles. Each one is 3 stories tall, weighs 78,000 pounds, and carries a single W-56 nuclear warhead yielding 1.2 megatons, enough to erase a city. On this morning, they are simply 10 green, ready lights on the console, humming quietly in their silos, waiting for a signal that everyone prays will never come. It is just after 8:40 local time. The capsule is warm, the coffee is stale, and the overnight watch has been uneventful. Carlson stretches, glances at the status board one more time, and prepares to hand the shift over to the day crew. Outside, the Montana sky is the color of cold steel, and the wind is starting to pick up across the frozen plains. Nothing feels unusual. Nothing looks out of place. Yet in less than 5 minutes, every one of those 10 green lights will turn red, and Echo Flight will become the first, and still most documented, case of an entire flight of nuclear missiles going inexplicably offline at the exact moment something strange appears in the sky above them. The prairie keeps its silence. The missiles keep their vigil. And the two officers underground have no idea that history is about to turn a page no one was ever supposed to read. At 8:45 on March 16, 1967, the first light on Echo Flight's status console blinked from solid green to red. One missile, L-06, had just dropped off strategic alert. Captain Eric Carlson leaned forward, assuming a momentary glitch. Then L-07 went red. Then L-08. Within 5 seconds, every single light on the board, 10 missiles, 10 warheads, 10 independent channels, flashed red in perfect sequence. The console speaker crackled with the automatic voice message that every missile crew trains for but never expects to hear. No go, no go, no go, 10 times in a row. Carlson grabbed the direct line to the wing command post at Malmstrom. His voice stayed level, but the words were ice. Echo Flight is down. All birds are off alert. Up on the surface, security police at each launch facility saw the same thing. The heavy vault doors still sealed, padlocks intact, no smoke, no explosion, no sign of intrusion. Power from the commercial grid was steady. Diesel backup generators sat cold and unstarted. The capsule itself never lost a single watt. Lights, air, coffee pot. Everything normal except the entire flight of nuclear missiles had simply stopped. The Minuteman I system was engineered for exactly the opposite of what just happened. Every component had been hardened against the one thing the Air Force feared most: a Soviet first strike. The logic was brutal and elegant. A single electromagnetic pulse from a high-altitude nuclear detonation could fry civilian electronics for 1,000 miles, but Minuteman was supposed to survive and retaliate. Guidance sets were wrapped in copper shielding. Cables were buried 6 feet deep in conduit filled with inert gas. The command links used ultra-low-frequency pulses that could punch through a fireball. Even the launch switches required 2 officers turning keys 30 feet apart to prevent a single madman from starting World War III. To drop even one missile off alert required a specific fault code: overheating gyro, low hydraulic pressure, guidance computer failure, something. Yet every silo reported the identical Channel 9 no-go fault, a vague error that meant the missile had simply stopped talking to the capsule. No lightning strike, no power surge, no EMP test scheduled anywhere in North America. Boeing engineers later calculated the odds of all 10 missiles suffering the exact same random failure within 5 seconds of each other, 1 in 10 to the 17th power. For perspective, that's roughly the chance of winning the lottery 17 times in a row while being struck by lightning on the way to cash the tickets. The official 341st Strategic Missile Wing Command history, declassified decades later, records the event in dry military prose. March 16, 1967, Echo Flight experienced a complete loss of strategic alert on all 10 launch facilities. Cause unknown. No evidence of sabotage or external attack. Full alert status restored after 23 hours of troubleshooting. 23 hours. That is how long it took teams of Boeing and Air Force technicians, flown in on emergency priority, to bring the missiles back online, one, by physically resetting each guidance computer and reloading the targeting tapes. They never found a broken wire, a burned fuse, or a single failed component that could explain why 10 separate nuclear weapons had simultaneously and silently decided they were no longer available for Armageddon. The capsule crew sat underground, watching red lights that refused to turn green, while the frozen Montana wind howled across the plains above them. For the first and only time in the history of the U.S. nuclear arsenal, an entire flight of ICBMs had been shut down by something the system was specifically designed never to allow. And the morning was only beginning. While Echo Flight's 10 missiles were still dark, something else was happening 30 miles to the southeast at Oscar Flight. At approximately 8:50, the same frozen morning, security policemen topside at Oscar's launch facility O-07 radioed their capsule with a message that no one in the missile business was trained to receive. "Sir, there's a glowing red-orange object hovering over the front gate. It's big, maybe 60 or 80 feet across, and it's just sitting there, pulsing." First Lieutenant Robert Salas, deputy commander of Oscar Flight that morning, heard the tremor in the sergeant's voice. A second guard broke in. "It's moving now, slow, toward the LF. No sound. Lights underneath, like it's rotating." Within minutes, similar calls came from 2 more Oscar sites. Guards described the same object. Oval-shaped, bright crimson with a soft orange halo, low enough that it lit up the chain-link fence and cast shadows across the snow. One policeman later said it felt like staring at a huge, silent furnace hanging in the air. Then, almost on cue, Oscar's console lit up with the identical Channel 9 no-go faults. 1 missile, then 4, then all 10 dropped off alert in the space of a few seconds. Salas ordered the guards to ready their weapons, but the object simply drifted higher, brightened for a moment, and vanished toward the northeast. No acceleration, no trail, no sonic boom. By the time the flight security controller arrived topside, the sky was empty and the missiles were dead. The timing is impossible to ignore. Echo lost its flight at 8:45. Oscar began receiving visual reports at 8:50 and lost its flight less than 10 minutes later. Two separate capsules, two separate crews, two separate sets of 10 Minuteman missiles, 20 nuclear weapons total, taken offline within minutes of each other while security teams on the surface watched a large, glowing object maneuver at will above the launch facilities. Captain Eric Carlson at Echo never saw the object himself. He was 60 feet underground, but he later confirmed that his own topside guards reported strange lights in the sky at the exact moment the missiles went down. Those reports were quickly classified and removed from the routine logs. Robert Salas, however, refused to stay quiet. In retirement, he testified under oath, first to researcher Robert Hastings in 1996, then to the National Press Club in 2000, and again to the Citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013. The object was real, the shutdown was real, and the two events happened together. The official investigation, led by the Air Force's 15th Air Force and Boeing, never once mentioned the guard's sightings in its final report. The word UFO appears nowhere in the declassified engineering summary. Instead, the cause was eventually labeled an anomalous noise pulse on the command link, a phrase that explains exactly nothing and satisfied exactly no one who was there. The glowing red-orange visitor left no traces in the snow, no radiation spikes, no film. Only the testimony of half a dozen trained military observers who watched it hover, pulse, and depart, and 20 nuclear missiles that were suddenly, silently, no longer ready for war. The Air Force still refuses to connect the two events. The men who were there never believed the separation for a minute. By noon on March 16th, the frozen plains around Malmstrom were crawling with specialists. C-133 Cargomasta aircraft ferried Boeing guidance experts from Hill Air Force Base in Utah. Flatbeds hauled shielded test vans across icy roads. Security perimeters expanded to keep curious ranchers at bay. Every one of Echo's and Oscar's 20 silos was opened in sequence. The 90-ton doors rolled back, and technicians in bunny suits descended on elevators into the cold, silent launch tubes. They expected to find something dramatic: scorched wiring, melted transistors, evidence of the electromagnetic pulse everyone quietly feared. Instead, they found perfection. Cabling was pristine. Voltage levels were nominal. Shielding integrity tested 100%. Even the dust patterns inside the guidance compartments looked undisturbed. One Boeing lead engineer later told investigator James Klotz, off the record, "It was like the missiles decided to take a nap." The only repair that worked was brute force replacement. At each silo, the entire guidance and control (GNC) unit, an NS-17 inertial platform the size of a large suitcase, was unbolted, lifted out, and swapped with a fresh one flown in from Ogden Air Logistics Center. New targeting tapes were loaded, alignment checks performed, and only then did the red lights finally turn green again. By the morning of March 17th, roughly 24 hours after the first missile dropped, both flights were back on strategic alert as if nothing had happened. The official Boeing summary, submitted to Strategic Air Command on April 2, 1967, and declassified in heavily redacted form decades later, contains a single operative sentence. Cause of the Echo/Oscar flight shutdowns remains unknown. Everything else, 23 pages of oscilloscope traces, fault tree diagrams, and EMP simulation results, ends with the same conclusion: no evidence of external pulse, internal failure, or human error sufficient to explain simultaneous identical faults across 20 geographically separated systems. When researcher Robert Hastings filed FOIA requests for the technical appendices, the raw strip chart recordings, spectrum analyzer prints, and the complete Channel 9 fault logs, he received the standard response: records no longer exist. The attachments listed in the master report simply vanished sometime between 1970 and the first declassification review. The National Archives, the Air Force Historical Research Agency, and Ogden Logistics all returned the same answer: missing. What remains is a clean engineering paradox. A system designed to survive nuclear attack was neutralized for an entire day by an event that left no fingerprint, required no repairs beyond swapping black boxes, and produced zero physical evidence anyone has ever been allowed to see. The missiles came back online not because anyone fixed anything, but because the condition, whatever it was, had simply decided to leave. 20 nuclear weapons were rendered inoperable, then quietly restored, and the most expensive investigation in Minuteman history ended with the quiet admission that no one could explain how or why. The file closes with the same word it opened with: unknown. Within days of the missiles returning to green, Strategic Air Command Headquarters at Offutt Air Force Base issued a short security memo that still circulates among researchers. Dated March 22, 1967, and marked for official use only. It instructed all personnel involved in Echo and Oscar flights to list any civilian or press inquiry about the incident under the heading UFO Rumors. The memo then states, in one crisp sentence, "Such rumors have been thoroughly disproven and require no further comment." No explanation, no supporting data, no signature block, just the quiet order to treat the entire 24-hour shutdown of 20 nuclear weapons as a non-event. That single sentence became the public face of the incident for decades. When reporters called Malmstrom's public affairs office, they were read the same line: "Rumors of UFO involvement are disproven." No retraction has ever been issued. The phrase still appears in the Air Force's official online fact sheet about the 1967 incident, unchanged since the 1990s. Most of the investigative files remain classified or missing. The complete Boeing engineering report, once 400 pages thick, now surfaces in FOIA releases as 33 pages of text with entire chapters replaced by the words "withheld" under Exemption 1. The electromagnetic pulse test data, the raw Channel 9 fault logs, and the security police witness statements are all gone or still locked away. Captain Eric Carlson, the Echo flight commander, stayed silent for 43 years. In 2010, researcher Robert Hastings finally reached him by phone. Carlson confirmed the full flight shutdown was real and unprecedented, but insisted he personally saw no UFO and had been told the cause was an electronic noise pulse. When pressed about the guard's reports of lights, he replied, "I can't talk about that." The slight pause before the sentence spoke louder than any confirmation. Yet one paragraph from the original investigation somehow survived every declassification cut. Tucked into the 341st Strategic Missile Wing's command history for 1967, it reads, "At no time during the Echo/Oscar incidents was there any evidence of sabotage, subversion, or external attack. However, the simultaneous failure of two separate flights of Minuteman missiles, without identifiable cause, represents a situation of grave concern to this headquarters. That is the closest the Air Force has ever come to admitting something extraordinary happened. Everything else, witness names, guard post logs, the spectrum analyzer charts, either disappeared or was stamped too sensitive for release half a century later. The missiles never went down again in quite the same way. The rumors were officially disproven, and the men who were there carried the memory in silence, some until their dying day. From Montana's missile fields, where the prairie wind still blows over silent silos, we travel across the world to a night in 1976 when an entire city looked up and saw the sky no longer belong to us alone. It is just past midnight on September 19, 1976, and Tehran is finally cooling after another furnace-hot day. The city of 3 million souls lies beneath a velvet black sky washed clean by the dry desert wind. In the wealthy northern district of Shamiran, where diplomats and generals live behind high walls and jasmine hedges, people are stepping onto balconies and rooftops, drawn by something strange above the Alborz Mountains. At first it looks like an unusually bright star, low on the horizon, flashing brilliant colors, blue, green, red, orange, in quick succession. Then it begins to move. Not the slow drift of an aircraft, but deliberate, angular shifts, as if whatever is up there is turning to look back down at the city. Telephone lines to the Imperial Iranian Air Force switchboard at Mehrabad Airport start lighting up. Civilians, some of them high-ranking officials, report an object the size of a full moon, hovering silently 32 nautical miles north of the capital. Inside Mehrabad's control tower, the senior radar controller watches his Soviet-built P-30 screen paint a solid, unambiguous return at 32 miles north, altitude unknown, speed 0. Whatever it is stationary, yet it keeps flashing the same sequence of colors the civilians are describing. The duty officer makes the call that will turn a quiet Saturday night into one of the best documented aerial encounters in history. At 0:57 local time, the scramble klaxon echoes across the flight line of the 1st Tactical Air Base at Cherokee. Ground crew roll back hangar doors under floodlights as 2 fully armed F-4 Phantom II interceptors are towed into position. Engines howl to life. Afterburners flare white-hot against the darkness, and within minutes the first jet is climbing hard toward the north. Cockpit lights dimmed to preserve night vision. Radar sweeping the sky ahead. Over the radio net, the tower controller's voice is calm but urgent. Unknown traffic bearing 005. Range 30 miles from Mehrabad. Altitude unknown. Civilians report bright multicolored strobing. Proceed with caution. The pilot acknowledges, pushes the throttles forward, and the Phantom streaks north at 600 knots, chasing something that has already been watching Tehran for more than an hour. Far below, the city holds its breath. Balconies fill with more spectators. In the villages along the mountain foothills, dogs bark at the sky. And somewhere above the ancient Persian capital, a clear September night is about to become something no one, civilian, pilot, or general, will ever forget. Captain Mohammad Reza Azizkhani rolls F-4 Phantom hashtag 3-6305 onto runway heading at 105. Afterburners punch twin blue-white spears into the night as the jet leaps skyward, climbing hard toward the north. Within 4 minutes, he is already passing 15,000 feet, airspeed 480 knots, heading 005. Mehrabad radar vectors him cleanly. Phantom 05, traffic now bearing 010 for your position. Range 27 nautical miles. No transponder, no altitude readout. At 20,000 feet, Azizkhani flips on the /APQ 120 radar. The scope lights up instantly, a strong, steady return, brighter than any airliner he has ever tracked. Size of the contact is roughly that of a Boeing 707, but it is stationary, hovering motionless at approximately 25,000 feet above the desert floor. He calls the tower. Contact. Solid lock. Proceeding to close. He pushes the throttles past military power into Zone 5 afterburner. Mach 1.3. The Phantom closes the gap fast. 20 miles. 15. 10. At 8 miles, the object suddenly begins strobing brilliant colors again, so bright that the pilot can see them through the canopy without night vision goggles. Blue, green, red, orange, like a rotating beacon the size of a house. 6 miles. Azizkhani arms the weapons panel for an AIM 9 Sidewinder shot, just in case. That is when everything goes dark. Without warning, every cockpit light dies. The radar scope blanks. UHF radios fall silent. The generator warning lights illuminate red. Even the standby compass spins lazily. The Phantom is suddenly a 50,000-pound glider with no electrical power, no weapons control, no way to talk to anyone. As is Connie's first instinct is a flameout, but both engines are still spooling normally. He can feel the thrust, hear the roar. It is only the electrical bus that has died. He snaps the jet into a hard descending turn to the south, away from the object. The moment he rolls wings level and points the nose back toward Tehran, every system flickers and comes alive again. Radios, radar, instruments, weapons panel, all normal. He keys the mic, voice tight. Mehrabad, Phantom 05. Complete electrical failure at 6 miles from target. All systems restored when I turned away. Request immediate vectors home. The controller's reply is stunned silence for 2 full seconds. Then, 05, cleared direct Mehrabad. Descend and maintain 7,000. As is Connie never re-engages. He lands long, rolls out, and shuts down on the ramp with hands that are still shaking. Ground crew later find nothing wrong with the aircraft. No blown fuses, no tripped breakers, no scorch marks. The jet is flown again the next morning without incident. One of the most advanced interceptors in the Middle East had just been switched off and on again by something 30 miles north of Tehran, like a child playing with a light switch. Back on the ground, the object is still there, still flashing, still waiting. At 1:40 the klaxon sounds again. This time it is Lieutenant Perviz Jafari, senior squadron leader, 25 years old, 2,000 hours in the Phantom, who straps into F4 #3-6307. He has just debriefed as is Connie and knows exactly what he is flying into. Engines light. Afterburners slam the jet down the runway, and Jafari climbs even harder than the first aircraft, straight toward the still hovering object now visible from the base as a pulsing star. Mehrabad radar hands him off immediately. Phantom 07, traffic 005 degrees, 27 nautical miles, no altitude, no squawk. Jafari's own N/APQ, 120 locks on at 27 nm. The return is so strong the scope gain has to be turned down to keep the symbol from blooming. Size comparison, larger than a KC-135 tanker. He calls it out calmly. Solid radar contact. Closing at 600 knots indicated. At 25 nautical miles the object begins to move, slowly at first, then accelerating smoothly to 150 knots northbound. Jafari matches the turn, keeping the nose on. At 20 nm he levels at 25,000 feet and reduces power to stay subsonic. The unknown is now visually brilliant, a flat diamond-shaped light, top half flashing intense blue-green, bottom half strobing red and orange in a perfect rectangular pattern. Smaller white lights appear at each corner, steady. 15 miles. Jafari arms the master armament switch. 2 a.m. 9D sidewinders go live. The growl in his headset is loud and steady, good infrared tone. He flips the trigger to missile and waits for the optimum bracket. 12 miles. Without warning, the weapons control panel dies. The sidewinder tone vanishes. The radar scope blanks. UHF, VHF, intercom, everything electrical, goes dark. The cockpit is suddenly quiet except for wind rush and engine noise. Jafari glances at his backseater, Major Gholam Reza Barami. The navigator's instruments are dead too. The Phantom is flying on Whiskey Compass and standby Euro alone. Jafari's first reaction is the same as is Connie's. Hard turn away. He rolls 135 degrees left, pulls 4.5 GS, and dives toward Tehran. The instant the nose drops below the object's bearing, every system snaps back. Radar returns, radios crackle, sidewinders growl again. He rearms, but the moment he begins a turn back north, the panel dies a second time. He tries it twice more. Whatever is out there is drawing a clear line. Come closer with weapons, and you lose control. Now the object does something no one expects. It ejects a small cylindrical craft, bright white, that descends rapidly toward the desert floor. Jafari watches it drop to about 3,000 feet, hover, then shoot straight back up and rejoin the main body like a yo-yo on a string. Seconds later, a second small object, this one disc-shaped and sparkling, detaches and streaks southeast at tremendous speed. Jafari instinctively gives chase. The disc accelerates to better than Mach 2, pulling away effortlessly. Jafari lights afterburners and pushes the Phantom past Mach 1.6, but the gap only widens. At 150 miles from Tehran, the small object begins a series of perfect cubic turns, 90-degree angles at constant speed, no radius. Jafari's radar tracks it for 180 miles before it simply vanishes off the scope near the Afghanistan border. Back at the main object, now alone again, Jafari circles at a respectful 20 miles. He has full systems, but he keeps the weapon switch off. The Diamond continues its silent light show for another 10 minutes, then climbs vertically at impossible speed and disappears into the stars. Jafari lands at 2:10 with 1,200 pounds of fuel remaining and a cockpit tape that will later be classified by both Iranian and American intelligence. The F-4 is inspected nose to tail. No faults, no blown breakers, no magnetic anomalies. The jet flies the next sortie without incident. 2 Phantoms, 2 experienced crews, 2 complete avionics shutdowns at the exact moment they attempted hostile action. Both times, systems restored the instant they turned away. The sky over Tehran had just drawn a boundary no earthly aircraft could enforce. High above the desert, the Diamond still hangs motionless, strobing its silent colors like a patient lighthouse. Then, without warning, one of the 4 corner lights brightens and simply leaves the formation. It is smaller than the main body, perhaps 10 or 12 feet across, and perfectly cylindrical, glowing brilliant white with a faint blue halo. It drops straight toward Jafari's Phantom at a speed that makes the pilot's hand tighten on the stick. Jafari's first thought is missile. He jerks the F-4 into a hard brake left, calling incoming to his backseater. The cylinder matches the turn effortlessly, closing from 5 miles to less than 1 in what feels like a heartbeat. It flashes past the canopy so close that both crewmen see surface detail. Smooth, metallic, no seams, no exhaust, no wings. It passes underneath and behind them, then instantly reverses direction and rejoins the Diamond as if nothing had happened. The entire maneuver lasts 4 or 5 seconds. No sonic boom. No heat, no radar clutter from a launch. Jafari's flare button is already pressed, nothing drops. The countermeasures panel is dead again, just like the weapon's bus. He is defenseless, and whatever is flying beside him knows it. A minute later, the Diamond performs its second trick. From the lower right corner, a new object separates. This one disc-shaped, sparkling silver white, maybe 6 feet in diameter. It descends in a gentle spiral toward the dark earth south of Mehrabad Airport. Jafari watches it fall to roughly 2,000 feet, hover for several seconds above an empty field, then shoot straight back up and dock with the main craft in one fluid motion. The reunion is perfect, silent, instantaneous. On the ground, dozens of civilians and at least 2 off-duty air traffic controllers witness the descent. They later describe a glowing disc that stops, hovers, and illuminates the ground beneath it with a cold white light before vanishing upward. One family in a village south of the field swears the object was low enough to light up their courtyard and scare their dogs into silence. Jafari circles at a safe distance, breathing hard, refusing to rearm. The Diamond gives no further displays of aggression. It simply waits, pulsing softly, as if the smaller objects were children briefly released to play and now called home. Years later, when Jafari, by then a retired general, tells the story to American investigators, his voice stays level, almost reverent. He never felt threatened after the first pass, only watched. Whatever those smaller craft were, They moved with a calm intelligence that needed no weapons, no noise, no hurry. They had come close enough to read the roundels on his wings, then returned to their parent the way dolphins return to the sea. The desert wind keeps its own counsel that night, and somewhere below, a patch of Iranian soil still remembers the cool white light that touched it for a moment and then was gone. The most authoritative summary of the Tehran incident is not Iranian, it is American. In late 1976, the Defense Intelligence Agency circulated a classified report coded IR 6846013776, titled UFO Sighting over Tehran. The document was pried loose through a 1978 FOIA request and remains one of the clearest official acknowledgments ever released. The first page carries the standard DIA header. Subject: UFO encounter by two Iranian Air Force F-4 Phantom jets, September 19, 1976. Distribution list includes the Joint Chiefs of Staff, NSA, CIA, and the White House staff. The tone is clinical, almost detached, yet the conclusion is unequivocal. Key paragraphs read: "This case is outstanding in that it represents a classic example of a UFO encounter which meets all the criteria necessary for a valid study of the UFO phenomenon. A. The object was sighted by multiple witnesses from different locations, Tehran, Mehrabad, and rural areas south of the city. B. Credibility of the witnesses is high, experienced aircrew and tower personnel. C. Radar confirmation of the object's presence and maneuvers. D. Adverse effect on aircraft instrumentation and systems when attempting close approach. E. Rapid acceleration and high-speed departure beyond known performance of any existing terrestrial technology. F. No evidence of hostile intent despite clear ability to engage." The report notes the two separate avionics failures occurred precisely when pilots armed weapons, and that all systems returned to normal the moment hostile intent was abandoned. It describes the smaller objects as highly maneuverable and under intelligent control. The final reliability rating is stamped in bold capitals, high. A separate attachment, prepared by the Air Force Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson, adds: "Rate of climb and descent, absence of sonic boom at high speed, and instantaneous direction changes exceed any known aircraft, missile, or spacecraft in 1976 inventory, U.S. or Soviet." The DIA document closes with a line that still echoes in FOIA circles. No explanation for the observed phenomena is apparent at this time. The report was never meant for public eyes. It was circulated only at the highest levels, then quietly filed away. When it finally surfaced in 1978, the Iranian Revolution was weeks away, the Shah was fleeing, and the Imperial Air Force records were being burned in the streets. The American copy is therefore the only complete, authenticated version left. Two F-4 Phantoms, among the most sophisticated interceptors of their day, were rendered temporarily helpless by something that responded to their actions as calmly as a parent removing a toy from a child's hand. The Defense Intelligence Agency watched the tapes, read the transcripts, interviewed the crews through back channels, and placed the event in the rarest category it possesses: real, unexplained, and of high intelligence value. While Iran's skies held secrets that night, Alaska's would soon reveal its own. November 17, 1986. The North Pacific is a black mirror under a thin crescent moon. Far above it, at 35,000 feet, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 glides northwest along the Great Circle route from Paris to Tokyo. The aircraft is a Boeing 747-200 freighter, registration J8119, heavy with its unusual cargo. Dozens of pallets of fine French Beaujolais Nouveau bound for the annual release celebration in Japan. The cockpit is quiet, almost sleepy. Only 3 souls are on board: Captain Kenju Terachi, First Officer Takanori Tamefuji, and Flight Engineer Yoshio Tsukuda. Between them, they have more than 30,000 flight hours. Tarachi is 47, a veteran of JL's polar routes since the early 1970s. He knows this sky the way sailors once knew the stars. The faint green shimmer of Aurora to the north, the endless white of the Alaskan interior sliding beneath the belly, the steady drone of 4 Pratt and Whitney JT-9 DS burning 30 tons of fuel an hour. At 17:06 Alaska Standard Time, the flight is just east of Fairbanks, cruising at Mach 0.84 on airway R-20, cleared direct to Anchorage for the fuel stop. The night is crystal clear, visibility unlimited, stars sharp enough to cut glass. Outside air temperature is minus 46 degrees Celsius. The only clouds are a thin cirrus deck 30,000 feet below. Nothing is scheduled to be anywhere near them for hundreds of miles. Tarachi sips coffee and glances at the inertial navigation display. 3 hours to Anchorage, then another 7 across the Pacific to Tokyo. A routine winter run he has flown dozens of times. At 17:11, while the 747 is crossing 63 degrees north, 141 degrees west, the first anomaly appears on the horizon ahead and slightly left of track. 2 objects, impossibly bright, materialize out of the darkness like someone has just switched on floodlights in empty sky. They are still far away, but already intense enough to cast shadows inside the cockpit. Tarachi leans forward, squinting. They are not aircraft lights. They are not the Aurora. And they are moving, fast, toward the 747. In the space of a heartbeat, a perfectly ordinary cargo flight carrying French wine across the top of the world is about to become one of the most thoroughly documented and stubbornly unexplained encounters in commercial aviation history. At 17:11 Alaska Standard Time, First Officer Tame Fuji is the first to speak. Captain, lights ahead, 11 o'clock, low. Captain Tarachi looks up from the navigation log. 2 distinct sources of light are visible against the star field, slightly left of course, maybe 30 to 40 miles away. They are bright, far brighter than any landing lights he has ever seen, and colored a deep amber with white edges. He reaches for the radio. Anchorage Center, Japan Air 1628. Do you have any traffic 11 o'clock, our level or slightly below? The controller's reply is immediate and casual. JL 1628, negative traffic. Skies yours all the way to the horizon. The lights are still closing. Not in the smooth, predictable arc of an intercepting fighter, but in short, sharp jerks. Left, right, up, down, like someone adjusting searchlights. Tarachi frowns. Military jets on a night exercise would have strobes, would be talking to center, would show on CAS. These show nothing. No transponder, no collision lights, no red or green position markers. Just 2 intense rectangles of amber-white illumination behaving like no aircraft in the inventory. At 20 miles, the objects suddenly accelerate. In the space of 2 or 3 seconds, they cover the distance and stop, dead stop, less than a mile off the left wing. Tarachi's coffee cup freezes halfway to his mouth. They are enormous. Each light is actually a structured craft, maybe 2 or 3 times the wingspan of the 747. The amber glow comes from rows of what look like exhaust ports or nozzles along their sides, pulsing in sequence. Between the rows, darker rectangular panels glow faintly white. The shapes are vaguely box-like, flattened, with no wings, no tail, no visible propulsion that makes sense. They fly in perfect formation, one slightly ahead of the other, rocking gently as if adjusting to the 747 slipstream. Tamafuji's voice is quiet. Captain, they're pacing us. Tarachi keys the mic again, steadier than he feels. Anchorage, Japan Air 1628. We have 2 unidentified objects, very large, now at our 10 o'clock, same level, same speed. Request radar confirmation. The controller sounds puzzled. JL 1628, No primary or secondary returns in your vicinity. Are you sure they're aircraft? Tarachi glances left. The nearest object is close enough that he can see heat shimmer, actual waves of warmth, rippling the air around it, even at minus 46 degrees outside. The cockpit temperature gauge jumps 3 degrees in 10 seconds. Then the lead craft does something that turns curiosity into real concern. It pivots 90 degrees in its own length, no bank, no turn radius, and presents a flat side directly at the 747. Every nozzle ignites at once. A wall of brilliant amber light floods the flight deck, bright enough that all 3 men shield their eyes. The cabin lights dim involuntarily. For 5 full seconds, the cockpit is bathed in color so intense it feels physical. When the glow fades, both objects have repositioned themselves, one now directly ahead of the 747's nose, the other off the right wing, still matching 500 knots ground speed exactly. They fly like escorts, silent and effortless. Tarachi exhales slowly. Whatever he assumed moments ago, military experiment, reflection, secret test, has just been erased. These are not jets. These are not balloons. These are something entirely different. And they have chosen to fly formation with a cargo plane full of French wine over the loneliest sky on Earth. At 1719, the 2 escorting objects suddenly accelerate forward, pulling a mile or 2 ahead of the 747. Captain Tarachi watches them slow, stop, and then, without turning, begin to merge. The amber rectangles flow together like liquid light, fusing into one continuous shape. In less than 5 seconds, the separate craft are gone, replaced by a single colossal structure hanging in the sky directly on the flight path. Tarachi's first coherent thought is scale. He has flown alongside U.S. Navy carriers at sea. He knows how big 2 of them would look stacked end to end. This object is larger. He later tells FAA investigators. Easily the size of 2 aircraft carriers, perhaps more. From wingtip to wingtip of the 747 is 195 feet. This thing dwarfs the Boeing like a minnow beside a whale. The shape is oblong, slightly flattened top and bottom, with a raised central ridge running its length, like a gigantic walnut shell made of dark metal. Along both flanks runs a perfect horizontal band of rectangular panels or windows, perhaps 30 or 40 on each side, evenly spaced. Each rectangle glows with a cool bluish-white light from within, bright enough to silhouette the entire hull against the starfield, but soft enough that no detail inside is clear. Flight engineer Tsukuda leans forward, voice hushed. "Captain, I can see movement behind the windows." Tarachi nods slowly. For a few seconds he thinks he sees tall, dark silhouettes passing back and forth. Humanoid, upright, deliberate. Later, when pressed by Japanese reporters, he will back away from that detail, saying the light was too diffuse to be certain. But in the moment, all 3 men agree. Something alive is inside. The underside of the craft is the most dramatic. A wide, shallow nozzle or vent ring, perfectly circular, maybe 50 feet across, sits dead center. From it pulses a rhythmic orange-red exhaust or plasma, not a flame like a rocket, but a deep, molten glow that brightens and dims every 2 or 3 seconds. Each pulse washes the entire 747 cockpit in warm color. The temperature gauge spikes another 5 degrees. The overhead panel lights dim again, as if the object is drawing power straight out of the air. Then the giant walnut performs its signature maneuver. Without banking or yawing, it rotates 360 degrees around its vertical axis in one smooth motion. No inertia, no tilt, just a slow, deliberate spin like a planet on an invisible spindle. As it turns, every rectangular window flashes in sequence, creating a ring of light that travels the length of the hull and back again. The effect is hypnotic. Tarachi later describes it as a scanning motion, like it was examining us. For nearly 8 minutes, the massive craft flies dead ahead, matching the 747's every tiny correction in altitude and heading. When Tarachi gently banks a few degrees left to test reaction, the walnut instantly slides sideways to remain centered on the nose. When he reduces power to slow by 10 knots, the object slows with him, the orange-red pulse dimming in perfect synchronization. At 1726, the walnut suddenly extinguishes its underside glow, darkens its windows to a faint ember, and accelerates straight ahead. In 3 or 4 seconds, it shrinks from a wall of light to a departing star and vanishes over the northern horizon. No sonic boom, no condensation trail, just gone. The cockpit is quiet except for the steady drone of the engines and 3 men trying to process what they have just shared the sky with for almost 15 minutes. Whatever it was, it had size, structure, deliberate movement, and an intelligence that chose to reveal itself to a routine cargo flight, carrying nothing more strategic than cases of Beaujolais Nouveau. The tape recorders in the cockpit kept running. The radar at Fairbanks and Anchorage kept painting ghosts. And somewhere above the Arctic Circle, the night grew a little colder. At 1726, the giant walnut has vanished northward, but the original 2 amber objects remain, now pacing the 747 1 mile off each wing. Captain Tarachi's voice is calm, but firm when he calls Anchorage Center again. Anchorage, Japan Air 1628. The large one departed, but the 2 traffic are still with us, left and right. They are very bright. The controller, John Campbell, has been listening for 15 minutes and no longer sounds casual. JL 1628, Roger. We have an intermittent primary return coinciding with your position. Can you execute a 360-degree turn for identification? Tarachi acknowledges immediately. He rolls the 747 into a standard rate right turn, 3 degrees per second, full 360 degrees at 35,000 feet. The 2 objects follow the turn perfectly, maintaining exact distance and relative bearing throughout the 4-minute circle. When the Boeing rolls out on the original heading, they slide back into station as if nothing happened. Campbell's voice rises half an octave. JL 1628. My radar showed a primary target completing the exact same 360 with you. Whatever it is, it's under positive control and matching your every move. At 1739, Campbell vectors United Airlines Flight 69, a 747-passenger flight inbound from the west, to turn early and attempt visual contact. UAL 69's captain reports a brief primary surge on his weather radar at the exact bearing Campbell gives, but nothing visual. Moments later, Elmendorf Regional Operational Control Center scrambles an Air Force C-130 from Anchorage to investigate. Meanwhile, the FAA's own long-range ARSR-4 radar at Talk Junction, 120 miles southeast, has been painting an uncorrelated primary target shadowing JL 1628 since 1719. The radar tapes, later released under FOIA, show 2 distinct tracks. One the known 747, the other a second primary return that orbits, paces, and performs the identical 360-degree turn in real time. Range from the 747 varies between 1 and 8 miles. Speed is identical to J8119 throughout. At 1745, the C-130 is airborne and climbing hard toward the area. The 2 amber objects instantly accelerate away from the 747, merge again into one bright return, and streak northeast at better than 2,000 knots on the military scopes. They vanish from all radars within 30 seconds, leaving only the 747 and the approaching C-130. The United crew never sees anything definite. The C-130 crew arrives too late and finds empty sky. But the FAA radar tapes, the military scopes, and the voice transcripts are unanimous. For more than 30 minutes, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 was escorted by something large, structured, and capable of maneuvers no aircraft on Earth could match. Something that responded to every instruction given by air traffic control as if it were listening. The evidence is not eyewitness memory alone. It is recorded on magnetic tape, time-stamped, and preserved in triplicate by 3 separate agencies. A routine cargo flight had just become one of the best radar-confirmed cases in aviation history. The encounter lasted 50 minutes, from 1711 to 1801 Alaska time, every second preserved on radar tapes and voice recordings. The FAA opened official file AL 1628-86 the next morning. Years later, under FOIA Case 2001-005-317, the data finally surfaced. 400 pages of transcripts, radar printouts, and internal memos that read like a quiet admission. John Callahan, then Chief of the Accidents and Investigations Division at FAA headquarters in Washington, was ordered to bring everything to a secure conference room in January 1987. The room already held representatives from the CIA, the FBI, and President Reagan's scientific staff. Callahan later testified, "I walked in with the radar data, the voice tapes, and the written reports. After we played the tapes and showed the radar tracks, one of the CIA men stood up and said, 'This meeting never happened. This event never happened. We were never here. Take the data back to your office and lock it up.'" Callahan asked what would be told to the public. The reply was blunt, "Nothing. And don't talk to the press, or you'll lose your job." The original radar tapes, recorded on high-density reel-to-reel, were boxed, labeled, and taken to FAA Technical Center in Atlantic City for archiving. They have never been seen again. The copies Callahan quietly kept in his safe are the only versions that survived. When he retired in 1998, he handed them to the Disclosure Project, where they remain available to any researcher who asks. The official FAA summary, released in redacted form in 2001, ends with a single line that still stands. Cause of the unidentified traffic observed by JL Flight 1628 on November 17, 1986, remains unknown. No weather inversion, no secret military test, no explanation ever offered. Just 50 minutes of radar-confirmed, multi-witness, multi-agency evidence that something enormous and intelligent flew alongside a civilian airliner for half an hour and then left at will. The file was closed. The tapes disappeared, and the men who saw it were told to forget. From Alaska's frozen skies, where a cargo plane full of wine shared the night with something beyond understanding, we descend into England's ancient forest, where 2 young airmen would soon face an encounter that would change every rule they thought they knew. It is 3 o'clock in the morning on December 26, 1980, and the Suffolk countryside is locked in the coldest winter Britain has seen in decades. Frost glitters under floodlights at the twin U.S. Air Force bases of RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge, 30 miles northeast of London and only 90 miles from the Soviet coast. Together, they house the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing, one of NATO's sharpest swords. Bentwaters hosts 3 squadrons of A-10 Thunderbolt TUS Squad, ugly tank killers built to stop Warsaw Pact armor on the North German plain. Woodbridge is the emergency divert field and, more importantly, one of Europe's largest nuclear weapons storage sites outside Germany. Beneath reinforced concrete bunkers known as the Hot Row, dozens of B-61 nuclear gravity bombs and W-84 warheads for ground-launched cruise missiles wait under triple locks and armed Marine Guards. Between the 2 bases lies Rendlesham Forest, a dark wedge of pine and birch planted after the First World War to supply timber for trenches. At night, the forest swallows sound and light. Even the perimeter road feels cut off from the world. The 81st is on a hair trigger. Soviet bombers routinely probe NATO airspace. Just 3 weeks earlier, a Tu 95 Bear flew so close to British waters that RAF Phantoms had to scramble. Every airman knows the alert klaxon can sound at any moment, and that within 6 minutes the first A-10s must be rolling, bombs already loaded. At 3 o'clock on Boxing Day morning, the bases are quiet except for the low hum of generators and the occasional cough of a patrol jeep. Security police squadron patrols move along the inner and outer fences under red-filtered flashlights. Most personnel are asleep after Christmas leave. Only skeleton crews man the towers and the central security control at Bentwaters. Across the forest, the east gate of RAF Woodbridge sits in a pool of sodium light. Two young airmen, John Burroughs and Bud Steffens, are on routine patrol in a pickup truck. The temperature is -8 Celsius. Their breath hangs in the cab like smoke. At 3:03, Burroughs notices colored lights descending through the trees beyond the fence line, low and fast, strobing red, blue, and white in a pattern he has never seen on any aircraft. They are moving deeper into Rendlesham Forest, toward the darkest part of the wood. He keys the radio. Central Security Control, Woodbridge Gate. We have lights in the forest. Looks like something just came down. The Cold War night is about to become something no NATO briefing ever prepared anyone for. At 3:03, the call crackles across the security net. Unidentified lights descending into Rendlesham Forest, approximately 1 mile east of East Gate. Central Security Control at Bentwaters wakes up fast. Within minutes, Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston, shift supervisor, and Airman John Burroughs climb into a Jeep with Patrolman Ed Cabansag and drive out the East Gate. Headlights off, red lens flashlights only. They follow the forest track until the ruts become too deep, then proceed on foot. The temperature is brutal. Frost crackles under their boots. Ahead, through the pines, a white light glows brighter than any flare, strobing red and blue in a slow, deliberate rhythm. At 3:20, they reach a small clearing no larger than a tennis court. The light is no longer in the sky. It is on the ground. Hovering 2 feet above the frozen earth is a triangular craft, perfectly isosceles, about 9 feet across at the base and 6 feet high. Its surface is like black glass, mirror smooth, reflecting the surrounding trees and the stunned faces of the airmen. No seams, no rivets, no wings, no propulsion vents. A steady white glow emanates from the top apex. Around the midsection, smaller colored lights. Red on the port edge, blue on the starboard. Pulse in sequence. The air smells faintly of ozone and pine needles. Peniston, the senior NCO, motions the others to stay back. He approaches alone, slowly, weapon lowered. The object does not react. At arm's length, he can feel warmth radiating from the surface, as if the hull is sun-heated despite the sub-zero night. He circles it once. On the upper left flank, just below the apex, is a band of raised markings, triangular symbols, hieroglyphic-like, each about 3 inches tall, arranged in a single row around the craft. He later describes them as etched or molded into the surface, not painted. He pulls out his notebook and sketches them by red flashlight. Burroughs, standing 20 feet away, watches the colored lights brighten and dim in waves. He feels static electricity lifting the hair on his arms. His watch stops at 3:24. Cabansag's radio fills with loud static, then dies completely. Peniston reaches out and touches the hull. It is smooth, almost oily to the fingertips, and warm, almost hot. The moment his gloved hand makes contact, the white apex light intensifies to blinding. Every colored light snaps to brilliant blue. The craft rises silently, no rush of air, no sound at all, threading upward between the pine trunks that should be too close together to allow passage. Branches bend slightly as it ascends, then spring back unharmed. At 50 feet it pauses, hovers for 3 or 4 seconds, then accelerates straight up. A shower of needle ice falls from the trees as the pressure wave finally arrives. The object shrinks to a point of light and streaks northeast toward the North Sea, leaving only the smell of ozone and 3 stunned airmen in a clearing lit by frost. Back at Bentwaters, the tower radar operator later confirms an uncorrelated return departing the area at high speed at 3:28. RAF Watton, 60 miles away, records the same track on its Martello long-range radar before it disappears offshore. In the clearing, the men discover a triangular depression in the frozen ground. 3 perfect indentations, each 8 inches deep, forming an exact equilateral triangle 9 feet on a side. The pine needles inside are scorched black. The surrounding frost is melted in a perfect circle 20 feet across. They mark the site with stakes and glow sticks. None of them speak on the drive back to base. They have just touched something that was never supposed to exist, and the forest has already begun to close its dark arms around the secret. At 22:30 on December 27th, Lieutenant Colonel Charles I. Halt, Deputy Base Commander of RAF Bentwaters and second-in-command of the entire 81st Tactical Fighter Wing, is at a late Christmas party in the Officers' Club when his radio crackles. Security police report the lights have returned to Rendlesham Forest, brighter than before, and now multiple objects are visible from the east gate. Halt changes from mess dress into cold weather gear, grabs a handheld cassette recorder, and assembles a small team. Sergeant Bobby Ball, Master Sergeant Monroe Nevels, Airman Bruce England with a Geiger counter, and Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston, who has not slept properly since touching the triangle 2 nights earlier. By midnight on December 28th, they are at the forest's edge. Halt begins recording what will become the famous 18-minute Halt tape, the only real-time audio document ever made by a senior U.S. Air Force officer during an active UFO incident. 2 seconds. Halt's calm voice. We're out here at the clearing site again. We're seeing lights in the sky and lights on the ground. Still getting readings on the Geiger counter, about 0.07 to 0.10 millirems per hour, 10 times background. The A/PDR, 27 clicks steadily in England's hand. Beta-gamma spikes are highest at the exact triangular depression left 2 nights earlier. The needle jumps every time Halt sweeps the probe over the 3 indentations. The surrounding soil is still depressed and brittle, as if baked. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Halt. There's a red glowing object, maybe 30 feet up, moving erratically between the trees. It's definitely moving. It's got a pulsing red light on top and smaller white lights underneath. The object drifts toward them, then stops, hovering just above the treetops. It is spherical, roughly the size of a small car, with a bright red glow on its upper half and a ring of white strobes around the equator. Every few seconds, it emits a narrow beam of pure white light that sweeps the forest floor like a silent searchlight. For minutes and 20 seconds. Halt. Voice rising slightly. Now we see it. It's coming this way. Pieces of it are shooting off. There's no sound at all. Sparks or droplets of molten light drip from the underside, falling slowly, then winking out before they reach the ground. The main object maneuvers between the pines with impossible precision. No rotor wash, no engine noise, just a soft red luminescence that paints the frost crimson. 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Halt. It's moving out toward the coast now. Wait, it just shot a beam down to the ground right in front of us. Another one. These beams are coming down like laser lights. 5 separate beams stab downward in quick succession, each one pencil thin and brilliant white. One strikes the ground 20 feet from the team. The frost instantly steams. Another sweeps across the clearing, illuminating every needle and twig in stark relief. 8 minutes and 33 seconds. Halt. Urgent. Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming down toward the weapons storage area. I repeat, a beam is being projected toward the hot row. The object has drifted east toward Woodbridge and is now hovering above the tree line that overlooks the nuclear bunkers. A narrow, intense shaft of light descends directly onto the hardened shelters where dozens of tactical nuclear weapons are stored. It lingers for 10 full seconds, then retracts like a tape measure. 10 minutes and 5 seconds. Halt keys his radio to Bentwater's central security control. Object is still in the sky, sending beams down over the base itself now. One beam just hit the ground near the tower. Security posts on Woodbridge confirm. Guards in the weapons storage area report a silent, intense light sweeping across the concrete pads and the marine sentry posts. No alarms trigger. No intrusion sensors activate. The light simply touches and withdraws. 12 minutes and 40 seconds. Halt. It's broken into 5 separate white objects. They're moving out fast to the north and south. Gone. The red sphere fragments into 5 smaller white lights that accelerate away in different directions, climbing vertically until they disappear among the stars. The forest falls silent again, colder than before. Halt's tape ends at 18 minutes and 22 seconds with the quiet click of the recorder shutting off. The Geiger counter readings, the light alloy soil samples, the plaster casts of the indentations, and the deputy commander's own voice are now permanent parts of the record. A full colonel with 20 years of service, a man whose next assignment would be command of a SAC bomber wing, has just documented, live and on tape, an intelligent, structured object systematically illuminating a nuclear weapons depot on NATO soil. The Cold War had never felt so fragile. On January 13, 1981, exactly 18 days after the final forest encounter, Lieutenant Colonel Charles I. Halt sat at his desk in Building 657 at RAF Bentwaters and typed a memorandum that would outlive every security classification he ever held. The header is simple and official. January 13th, 81. Subject, Unexplained Lights. To RAF/CC. The body of the memo is 3 crisp pages, single-spaced, marked unclassified, for official use only. It is addressed directly to the Ministry of Defense and copied to RAF 3rd Air Force and the U.S. Air Force European Headquarters in Ramstein. Every sentence is written in the terse, factual style expected of a senior officer reporting to the chain of command. Paragraph 1. Early in the morning of December 27th, 80, approximately 0300L, 2 USAF security police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate at RAF Woodbridge. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. Paragraph 2 describes the triangular craft, the indentations, and the elevated radiation. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest, a mechanical object of unknown origin. Later in the night, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles and then broke into 5 separate white objects. Halt lists precise measurements. Depression in ground, 9 feet across. 3 indentations 7 to 8 inches deep beta/gamma readings. 0.1 milliroentgens, 10 times background. In the center, decreasing outward tree bark readings on nearby pines. 0.05 to 0.07 Mr/HR on the side facing the landing site. He includes bearings and times taken with a light amplification scope. Object first observed bearing 110 degrees, moving erratically. Second sighting December 28th at 0000, 0400 beams directed toward the weapons storage area. The final paragraph is deliberately restrained. The following night similar lights were observed. The object was at times bright enough to illuminate the ground and was seen by the undersigned and several other personnel. The object was visible for over 2 hours. No speculation. No mention of aliens. Just the facts a deputy base commander is willing to put his name and rank to. The memo was transmitted through secure channels to the Ministry of Defense, where it was filed under reference DFE 24/1948 and stamped UK restricted for the next 23 years. When it was finally released in 2002 under the Freedom of Information Act, it arrived exactly as Halt wrote it. No redactions, no commentary, no rebuttal. The Halt memo remains the only document in British or American archives in which a full colonel formally reports, on official letterhead, the presence of unexplained structured objects maneuvering over a nuclear-armed NATO base for 3 consecutive nights. Everything else, tapes, radiation reports, witness statements, would be debated, misplaced, or denied. The memo itself simply stands, quiet, unclassified, and impossible to dismiss. For 3 years, the Rendlesham Forest incident stayed buried in classified channels. Then, on October 2, 1983, the British tabloid News of the World splashed the headline, "UFO lands in Suffolk," and that's official. A leaked copy of the Halt memo accompanied the article. Within hours, the U.S. Air Force in London issued a terse statement. The document is authentic. No denial, no explanation, just confirmation that a senior officer had indeed written those words. The Ministry of Defense maintained public silence until 1984, when it quietly downgraded the file from restricted to unclassified. Still, nothing was released. Freedom of information requests were answered with the same line for 17 years. No records exist. In 2001, the dam finally broke. Under pressure from researchers and MPs, the MOD released 210 pages in stages between 2002 and 2006, including the Halt memo, radiation readings, security police log excerpts, and internal correspondence that ended with the handwritten note. No further comment. In 2010, Charles Halt, now retired after commanding a SAC bomber wing and reaching the rank of full colonel, signed a notarized affidavit for the public record. It reads, in part, "The objects observed on those nights were under intelligent control and were not of terrestrial origin. They demonstrated technology far beyond any known aircraft or spacecraft in 1980, and they directed beams of light at the ground and at the weapons storage area. I stand by every word of my 1981 memorandum." 45 years have now passed since the frost-covered nights in Rendlesham Forest. Every principal witness who has spoken publicly, Halt, Penniston, Burroughs, Cabansack, has maintained the same core account under oath in books, documentaries, and congressional briefings. No deathbed retractions. No profit-driven embellishments that collapse under scrutiny. Just the same quiet insistence that something extraordinary happened on NATO soil and was documented by the people whose job it was to guard nuclear weapons. Soil samples taken from the landing site in 1981 still show slightly elevated radiation and brittle, dehydrated pine needles. The triangular indentations were measured and photographed by the base civil engineer within hours. The Halt tape, 18 minutes of real-time commentary by a lieutenant colonel, has been analyzed by audio engineers and remains pristine. The Ministry of Defense closed its UFO desk in 2009 with a final public statement. In over 50 years, no UFO sighting reported to the department indicated a threat to the United Kingdom. Rendlesham was never listed among those sightings. 40 years later, the case remains exactly where Colonel Halt left it in January 1981. Unexplained, officially acknowledged, and stubbornly resistant to every conventional answer offered since. From England's quiet woods, where the pines still keep their secret, we travel to America's desert skies, where, 17 years after Rendlesham, a formation of unknown lights would perform for an entire city and change everything. Thursday, March 13, 1997. The desert night is warm and perfectly clear from the Nevada border to Mexico. At 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, the first calls light up switchboards in Henderson, Nevada, just south of Las Vegas. Families on backyard patios, truckers on Highway 93, and off-duty police officers all see the same thing. a silent, gigantic V of amber gold lights gliding low and slow across the dark sky, heading southeast. By 8:15, the formation is over Prescott, Arizona, 180 miles away. Witnesses step out of restaurants and gas stations, pointing upward. The lights are perfectly spaced, 5 on each arm, one at the leading point, forming a precise chevron wider than the moon's orbit across the heavens. No strobes, no red or green navigation lights, no sound at all. Just 7 or 8 steady, soft gold orbs moving together like pearls on an invisible string. At 8:25, the V crosses over Phoenix itself, America's 6th largest city. Traffic on the Squaw Peak Freeway slows as drivers pull onto shoulders. People pour out of houses in Scottsdale, Tempe, Glendale, Mesa. Thousands of camcorders and disposable cameras tilt skyward. The object, or objects, passes directly over the heart of the metro area at an estimated altitude of only 2,000 to 3,000 feet, low enough that the city's glow reflects faintly off a dark, solid surface connecting the lights. Witnesses later swear the wingspan is a mile wide, larger than any known aircraft on Earth. By 8:40, the formation is south of Phoenix, drifting over the northern edge of Tucson, another 100 miles farther. Residents in the foothills watch it block out entire constellations as it glides overhead, silent and unhurried, before fading into the distance toward Mexico. In less than an hour, something traveled more than 250 straight-line miles across 3 states, visible to hundreds of thousands of people, civilians, airline pilots on final approach to Sky Harbor, Arizona National Guard crews, off-duty law enforcement officers. Yet it never appeared on a single FAA radar screen, never triggered a single military scramble, and never made a sound. By 10 p.m., emergency lines in every major city along the path are overwhelmed. Police dispatchers, themselves staring upward, can only tell callers, "We see it too. We don't know what it is." A warm desert evening that began with ordinary backyard barbecues has just become the largest mass sighting in American history. One continuous, silent passage witnessed by an entire state, recorded on dozens of home videos, and destined never to be satisfactorily explained. At 8 p.m. sharp, the first solid wave begins in northwest Arizona. In Kingman, retired airline pilot Mitch Stanley steps onto his porch with a beer and freezes. Above the Hualapai Mountains floats a perfect V of 5 amber gold lights, each the apparent size of a full moon, moving southeast at what looks like walking pace. Stanley races inside, grabs his 10-inch Dobsonian telescope, and tracks the formation for nearly 2 minutes. Through 254 millimeters of magnification, he sees no fuselage lights, no strobes, no wings, just 5 perfectly round, steady orbs connected by a dark, rigid structure that blocks out stars as it passes. He later tells investigators, it was a structure, one single object. Huge. By 8:12, the V is over Prescott Valley. Hundreds of residents flood 911 lines. Dispatcher recordings capture the disbelief. Caller, there's a giant boomerang of lights flying over the city. No sound. Dispatcher, ma'am, we're getting dozens of calls. We can see it from the window right now. At 8:17, it crosses the airspace boundary into Phoenix metropolitan area. Luke Air Force Base, home of the 56th Fighter Wing, is only 40 miles west. Barry Goldwater Range lies directly beneath the flight path. Yet no interceptors launch. The FAA Southwest Regional Air Traffic Control Center in Albuquerque receives frantic calls from private pilots who are watching the object from cockpits at 10,000 feet. One Cessna pilot reports, "It just went over me. No transponder, no radar return, maybe 2,000 feet above. It's blocking out half the sky." Inside Sky Harbor Tower, controllers lean against the windows. The formation is now directly above the airport at an estimated 2,500 to 3,000 feet, low enough that the glow reflects off the terminal roofs. Senior Controller Bill Grava later recalls, "We had it in sight for almost 5 minutes. 5 to 7 lights in a perfect V, amber color, steady burn, no navigation lights, no anti-collision strobes. We checked every radar scope, primary, secondary, and the ARSR, for long range. Nothing. It was like it didn't exist electronically. On the ground, entire neighborhoods spill into streets. In Awatuki, families lie on their backs in parking lots, watching the underside drift overhead. The lights are arranged in a shallow chevron, 5 on the left arm, 5 on the right, sometimes a 6th or 7th at the trailing center. Between them, the dark silhouette of a solid surface is unmistakable. Stars wink out as the leading edge passes and reappears seconds later behind the trailing edge. Witnesses consistently describe the span as a mile wide, maybe more. One former Navy aviator tells police, "I've seen B-52s at low level. This made a B-52 look like a toy. The object moves at roughly 30 to 40 miles per hour, walking speed in the sky. Perfectly straight, perfectly silent. No sonic boom, no rotor wash, no jet rumble. Only the soft desert wind and the growing chorus of human voices below. By 8:31, it has cleared the southern edge of the valley and is heading toward the Santon Mountains." Camcorders capture the final glow as it drifts over South Mountain, still in perfect formation, still blocking stars, still refusing to appear on any screen that measures the sky. For 15 continuous minutes, something the size of several city blocks flew directly over one of America's largest metropolitan areas in full view of hundreds of thousands of people, and the most sophisticated air defense network on the continent simply watched at approximately 10 p.m., 2 hours after the massive V had vanished south. A second and very different display began. Over the Estrella Mountains southwest of Phoenix, a new arc of bright white lights appeared, hovering motionless just below a low cloud layer. Unlike the earlier silent chevron, these lights blinked on one by one, drifted slightly, brightened dramatically, then winked out in sequence over the course of 10 to 15 minutes. News helicopters from channels 3, 5, 10, and 12 raced to the scene and broadcast the spectacle live across Arizona. The images are familiar to anyone who has seen military flares, brilliant white fireballs hanging under small parachutes, glowing at roughly 2 million candle power each. They formed a loose, ragged line rather than a precise V, and they clearly fell slowly behind the ridge line, dimming as they descended. Within hours, the U.S. Air Force offered an explanation. At Luke Air Force Base, Public Affairs confirmed that aircraft from the Maryland Air National Guard's 104th Fighter Squadron, temporarily deployed to Arizona under Operation Snowbird, had been conducting night training on the Berry Goldwater Range. Between 21:45 and 22:15 local time, for A-10 Thunderbolt IIs dropped a total of 10 LUU. 2B/B illumination flares at altitudes between 10,000 and 14,000 feet. The flares burn for approximately 4 minutes, drift with the wind, and are designed to light up battlefield targets for night attacks. The timing, location, and visual signature matched the 10 p.m. videos perfectly. The Maryland A&G commander provided flight logs, sortie sheets, and even the names of the pilots. Mitch Stanley, the astronomer who had watched the 8 p.m. object through his telescope, confirmed that the 10 o'clock lights looked exactly like flares he had seen many times before. This explanation was immediately accepted by the Air Force, the FAA, and Governor Fife Symington's office as the solution to the entire evening. At a now famous June 1997 press conference, Symington paraded his chief of staff in a cartoon alien costume and declared the case closed. Flares. Yet the flare explanation accounts only for the second event. The LUU. 2 flares were dropped 2 hours after the mile-wide V had already flown its 250-mile path from Nevada to Tucson. They were dropped 30 to 50 miles southwest of Phoenix, not over the city itself. They were white, not amber gold. They drifted and extinguished one by one, not in perfect formation. And most crucially, the 8 p.m. object was filmed and photographed by dozens of independent witnesses before the first flare was even loaded into an A-10. The military has never claimed the flares explain the 8 to 8:40 p.m. sightings. Every official statement limits the flare drop to the 10 p.m. stationary lights. The two events remain separate in every investigative file, yet in public memory they have been deliberately fused into one solved case. Flares explained what needed explaining for the cameras at 10 o'clock. They explained nothing about what flew silently over an entire state 2 hours earlier. The most frequent question asked about the Phoenix Lights is simple. If something a mile wide flew over a major city for 40 minutes, why didn't radar see it? The answer is found in the technical limitations of 1997 civilian and military radar coverage over Arizona, not in any conspiracy. The FAA's long-range ARSR, 4 radars at Phoenix and Tucson are optimized for en route traffic above 18,000 feet. Below that altitude, especially over mountainous desert terrain, the beams skip over entire valleys. The Phoenix Terminal Radar Approach Control, TRACON, uses shorter-range ASR, 9 systems designed to track aircraft within 60 miles and above 2,000 to 3,000 feet AGL near the airport. South Mountain, the Estrella Range, and the Superstition Mountains create permanent blind spots that swallow anything flying low and slow. In 1997, the FAA had no low-altitude radar coverage south or west of the city capable of reliably painting a target under 10,000 feet. At 8 p.m., the object was estimated by pilots and ground witnesses at 2,000 to 4,000 feet AGL, exactly inside the radar shadow. It moved at 30 to 40 miles per hour, below the speed threshold most systems filter out as clutter. It carried no transponder. It emitted no detectable heat signature strong enough for military infrared. Result: 0 primary or secondary returns on any civilian scope. NORAD's Joint Surveillance System radars at the time were focused outward, looking for Soviet bombers coming over the pole or missiles rising from submarines. Their look-down coverage over the continental U.S. was deliberately sparse to avoid tracking every Cessna and weather balloon. Continental U.S. NORAD region confirmed in writing that no unknown tracks were recorded on March 13, 1997, between 2000 hours and 2100 hours Mountain Standard Time. Luke Air Force Base, the closest military fighter base, had no aircraft airborne at 8 p.m., the A-10s dropping flares 2 hours later were still on the ground. No classified test flights were scheduled. No experimental aircraft filed restricted area requests for that corridor. The Barry Goldwater Range public affairs officer stated plainly, "We had nothing in the air that could produce what people described." Radar did not fail. It simply never had the geometry, altitude coverage, or clutter rejection settings to see a large, cold, slow, low object with no transponder. Modern low-altitude gap-filler radars and ADS-B would likely paint it today, but in 1997 the sky over south-central Arizona had a hole big enough to fly an aircraft carrier through. Witness testimony, thousands of trained and untrained eyes, filled the gap that technology left empty. They saw it because they could look up with nothing between them and the object except clear desert air. Radar could not, and that is the honest, documented reason the tapes are blank. The Phoenix Lights remain one of the best observed events in history precisely because, on that night, human eyes were the superior instrument. For 10 years, the official voice of Arizona laughed it away. On June 19, 1997, 3 months after the event, Governor Fife Symington held a televised press conference in the state capitol. Flanked by stern-faced staff, he announced that the culprit behind the Phoenix Lights had been found. The doors opened and his chief of staff shuffled in wearing a gray rubber alien mask and a black graduation gown. The room erupted in laughter. Symington grinned. This just goes to prove that the people of Arizona have a good sense of humor. The flare's explanation was repeated, the case declared closed, and the governor walked off stage to applause. 10 years later, on November 9, 2007, the same man stood before CNN cameras and said, quietly, "I'm going to reverse my earlier position. I was there that night. I saw it myself. It was enormous, otherworldly. It glided silently over the mountains, blocked out the stars, and was absolutely not flares, not military aircraft, and not anything conventional." Fife Symington, former U.S. Air Force officer and commercial pilot with over 5,000 hours, had never publicly admitted he was a witness until that moment. He described standing on a hillside in North Phoenix around 8:20 p.m. with family members, watching the gigantic V-shaped formation drift directly overhead at low altitude. He said the size was beyond comprehension, the silence absolute, and the movement deliberate and controlled. He added that he waited a decade to speak because "I didn't want to scare people or be ridiculed as governor." In the same interview, he revealed that he had quietly ordered the Arizona Department of Public Safety to investigate the 8 p.m. event. Their internal report, never released, concluded the object was larger than anything in known aviation inventory and unexplained. Symington also confirmed that Luke Air Force Base and the FAA privately told his office they had no aircraft capable of producing the sighting. By 2007, more than 1,600 written witness statements had been collected by researchers, including dozens from pilots, police officers, and engineers. Symington read many of them. He told CNN, "If I had to bet my life on what it was, I'd say it was not of this earth. It defied every law of physics I know." The reversal stunned Arizona. The same governor who once mocked the witnesses now stood as one of the highest-ranking elected officials in American history to publicly declare he had seen an unidentified craft of apparent non-human origin. The state never reopened the case. The Air Force never amended its flares explanation. But the man who once wore the authority to speak for Arizona had finally told the truth he carried for a decade. "I saw it. It was real. And we still don't know what it was." The Arizona sky eventually quieted. But off California's coast, 12 years later, another set of lights would appear, this time on Navy gunsight cameras. And the question would no longer be confined to eyewitnesses alone. November 14, 2004. 80 nautical miles southwest of San Diego, the Pacific is flat and glassy under a high overcast. Carrier Strike Group 11 is in the middle of its final workup before a 6-month deployment to the Arabian Sea. The centerpiece is USS Nimitz, CVN 68, a 100,000-ton nuclear-powered supercarrier fresh from refit, her deck humming with the growl of catapult launches and the shriek of arrested landings. Aboard the Aegis cruiser USS Princeton, CG-59, steaming 20 miles ahead of the carrier, the Spy, 1B phased array radar watches everything within 250 miles. Princeton's Combat Information Center is running a live air defense exercise, tracking dozens of friendly aircraft, simulating missile engagements, and feeding real-time data to the entire group via Link 16. On Nimitz's flight deck, Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the Black Aces, are flying their new Block 2F divided by a -18F Super Hornets. The two-seat Rhino has just replaced the older Tomcat. Its glass cockpit is packed with the latest toys. APG-73 radar, FLIR targeting pods, and the brand-new joint helmet-mounted cueing system. Pilots are practicing basic fighter maneuvers, air-to-air refueling, and low-level runs over the empty ocean. The exercise is routine. Everyone has done it 100 times. The biggest worry is not missing the 1900 steak night in the wardroom. At 9:30 Pacific Time, Princeton's senior radar operator, Petty Officer Kevin Day, notices something odd on the Spy-1 scope. A cluster of targets appears at 80,000 feet, essentially the edge of space, then drops in seconds to 20,000 feet, hovers, and drops again to sea level. The contacts are not squawking any transponder code. They are not on the scheduled player list. They are not balloons, not weather, not anything in the training syllabus. Day calls the supervisor. The supervisor calls the captain. The captain calls Nimitz. By 10 o'clock, the entire strike group is quietly watching a group of objects that have been loitering in their training area for days, moving in ways no aircraft or missile on Earth can move. What began as a standard pre-deployment drill off the California coast is about to become the best documented, sensor-rich military encounter with an unidentified aerial phenomenon in history. And the first pilots are already walking toward their jets. It actually started 4 days earlier. On November 10, 2004, Senior Chief Kevin Day, Princeton's lead air defense radar operator, noticed the first ghosts. At 28,000 feet, directly above the training box, a cluster of 8 to 10 targets appeared on the SPY 1B screen, hovered motionless for hours, then vanished. Day assumed a system glitch. He rebooted the arrays, ran built-in tests, and realigned the phase shifters. The contacts came back the next day, same place, same behavior. By November 13th, the pattern was undeniable. Groups of objects, sometimes 2, sometimes as many as 10, would materialize at 80,000 feet or higher, then drop vertically in blocks of 20,000 to 30,000 feet in less than a second. The SPY-1B is designed to track ballistic missile reentry vehicles at Mach 20. These things were doing the opposite, falling like stones with no heat bloom, no deceleration, no sonic crack. They would stop dead at 20,000 feet, hover for minutes or hours, then drop again to sea level and hold position a few hundred feet above the waves. Day's raw data logs show instantaneous velocity changes that break physics textbooks. One track went from 80,000 feet to 28,000 feet in 0.78 seconds, roughly 100 times the acceleration of gravity, with no radar return smear that would indicate high speed. It simply relocated. Another contact accelerated from a hover to better than 3,000 knots in under 2 seconds, then stopped again. The SPY-1B's Doppler processor flagged these as impossible tracks, yet the returns were solid, high signal-to-noise, consistent across all 4 radar faces. Princeton's combat systems officer ordered a full recalibration. Technicians swapped out the signal processor, ran cross-checks with the carrier's SBQ-9B Horizon Search Radar, and even brought the /SPY-1B offline for a complete power cycle. The targets remained. They were real, external, and under intelligent control. Day began plotting them on a grease board, clusters of 5 to 10 objects in loose echelon, loitering in a 100-mile racetrack pattern above the strike group's operating area for days. They never drifted with the wind. They never squawked Mode 3 or civilian transponder codes. They simply watched. On the morning of November 14th, Day counted more than 100 separate contacts over a 6-hour watch. He told the captain, "Sir, whatever these are, they've been here all week. They're not ours, and they're not scheduled." The captain's reply was short, "Get eyes on them." Princeton CIC went to general quarters quiet. No alarms, no announcements. Just the soft click of safeties coming off and the low hum of the most advanced radar system in the fleet painting targets no one had ever trained to fight. The ocean below stayed calm. The sky above stayed empty to the naked eye. But the screens were full of ghosts that moved like nothing in the inventory, and the strike group was no longer alone. At 13:45 on November 14th, Commander David Fravor, CO of VFA 41 Black Aces, straps in a fast Eagle 01, a 2-seat F divided by a -18F with Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich in the back. His wingman, Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, with Lieutenant Chad Underwood WSO, takes fast Eagle 02. Both jets are light tanker configuration, 2 wing tanks, 2 AM 9s, 1 AM, 120, and a full load of 20 millimeters for the gun. No bombs, no fleur pod on Fravre's jet. Underwood carries the only at fleur. Princeton vectors them west. Fast Eagles, merge, plot your bullseye, 270 for 60. Angels unknown, last seen descending through 20,000. Fravre pushes the throttles to military power and climbs to 20,000 feet. At 60 miles, the CAP point is empty sky. Then Slate calls it. Skip, 2 o'clock low, looks like a submarine with a periscope. Fravre looks down and sees a perfectly circular patch of churning white water, 60 to 80 feet across, directly beneath them. The ocean around it is calm, but inside the circle it is boiling as if something huge just left the surface or is hovering just under it. No debris, no wake, no ship for miles. As they orbit at 20,000 feet, a white oblong object rises out of the disturbance and stops 40 feet above the water. It is approximately 40 feet long, smooth, featureless, shaped like a giant tic-tac candy. No wings, no rotors, no windows, no exhaust plume, no markings. It hovers motionless for several seconds, then begins a slow left-to-right oscillation, rocking like a metronome. Fravre decides to go down for a closer look. He rolls inverted, pulls the nose down, and descends in a tight spiral. The tic-tac instantly stops rocking and points its long axis directly at him, like it is looking back. Fravre levels at 12,000 feet, 1.5 miles away, and starts a gentle left turn to circle. The object mirrors his turn perfectly, maintaining exact angular separation. He reverses to right turn, it reverses. He noses over and descends, it descends. Every move he makes, the tic-tac counters in real time, as if they are dogfighting. Fravre keys the mic, half laughing, half serious. This thing is reading my mind. He decides to go nose on. He pushes the throttles forward and closes head-to-head at 500 knots. The tic-tac stops mirroring and begins climbing toward him. At half a mile separation, Fravre is already reaching for the master arm to lock it up. Then it happens. In the space of a single blink, the object accelerates from a hover to beyond visual range. There is no streak, no blur, no sonic boom, just gone. Fravre's HUD clock shows 0.3 seconds from stop to disappear. He looks left, looks right, looks up, nothing. Princeton breaks in, calm but stunned. Fast Eagle, if you're done playing, your contact is now at your assigned CAP point, 60 miles east. Fravre and Slate climb back to 20,000 and turn east. 60 miles away, exactly at their pre-briefed rendezvous coordinates, the same white tic-tac is already waiting, hovering motionless as if it had been there all day. Fravre circles once at a respectful distance, weapons safe. The object hovers for another 10 seconds, then climbs vertically at impossible speed and vanishes into the overcast. Total engagement time, less than 5 minutes. No radar lock, no heat signature, no photographs from Fravre's jet. Only 4 sets of human eyes, and one of the most experienced fighter squadrons in the Navy left speechless. On the way home, Fravre tells Slate over private frequency, "I've been doing this 20 years, and I've never seen anything react like that. It was like it wanted to play." Princeton's radar tape later shows the object covering 60 miles in under 1 second, roughly 3,600 miles per hour, with no acceleration curve, no heat bloom, no sonic footprint. The ocean below returns to glass. The sky stays empty. But the strike group will never look at an empty radar screen the same way again. Approximately 40 minutes after Commander Fravre's tic-tac vanished, Princeton still had active contacts. At 14:05, 2 more Black Aces Super Hornets, Fast Eagle 03 and 04, launched from Nimitz with full-of-fleur pods. Fast Eagle 03 was flown by Lieutenant Commander Chad Underwood, the same WSO who had been in Slate's back seat earlier. This time he was driving, with a brand new Raytheon and /ASQ. 228 at Fleur Pod hanging under the left cheek station. Princeton vectored them to a new merge plot 40 miles west of the carrier. Underwood arrived at 20,000 feet to find a single white oblong object hovering at approximately 15,000 feet against a featureless sea background. He immediately rolled the pod to TV mode, zoomed to narrow field of view, and began recording what the world now knows as Fleur 1. The footage opens at 13 hours 8 minutes and 42 seconds Pacific Standard Time, November 14, 2004, timestamp burned into the lower left corner. The object is locked in thermal imaging, appearing bright white-hot against the cold ocean. It is roughly 40 to 45 feet long, oblong with rounded ends, no wings, no control surfaces, no exhaust. Aspect ratio is identical to Fravre's description, a giant flying tic-tac. For the first 15 seconds it drifts left of screen, slight yaw oscillations of plus or minus 5 to 10 degrees, as if gently rocking. Underwood's calm voice is audible on the cockpit intercom. "I've got him. Range about 8 miles. No heat bloom. No exhaust." At 18 seconds on the tape, the object suddenly banks hard left, approximately 70 to 80 degrees angle of bank in under one frame, 1/30th of a second. It then accelerates left to right across the screen so fast the pod's gimbal struggles to keep up. The slew rate indicator spikes to its mechanical limit. The crosshairs lag behind the target. Underwood instinctively slews the pod manually to recenter. In the space of 2 seconds, the object covers an angular distance that would require more than Mach 3 at that range, with no sonic boom and no heat signature increase. At 28 seconds, it stops dead, hovers again, then begins a slow clockwise rotation around its longitudinal axis, once every 4 to 5 seconds, while maintaining altitude and position. The rotation is smooth and constant, unlike any known aircraft tumble. Underwood switches to infrared narrow field and zooms further. The object remains featureless except for 2 small appendages or protrusions at the bottom that glow slightly hotter. Princeton breaks in on guard frequency. Traffic is now accelerating northbound. Last mode 3,600 knots, no squawk. Underwood attempts radar lock with the APG-73. The return is weak and intermittent, sometimes solid, sometimes disappearing entirely despite visual acquisition. He never achieves a firing quality track. The entire clip runs 1 minute 16 seconds. At 1 minute and 8 seconds, the object performs one final left-to-right acceleration, exits the pod's field of view, and is gone. Underwood's last words on tape: "It's gone. Just winked off." The original mini-DV cassette was removed from the Fleur pod immediately after recovery, placed in a classified courier pouch, and flown by helicopter to Nimitz. From there it disappeared into the carrier's intelligence spaces and, eventually, into a classified server at the Office of Naval Intelligence. The video remained secret for 16 years. It surfaced publicly in December 2017 via unauthorized release, then was officially acknowledged and re-released by the Department of Defense on April 27, 2020, under FOIA Case Dawn, Navy 2019-003, with the simple caption, "Unidentified Aerial Phenomena." Chain of custody forms, signed by Princeton's Combat Systems Officer and Nimitz intelligence officers, confirm the tape is unaltered, time-stamped, and exactly as recorded on November 14, 2004. 17 years later, it is still the clearest, highest-resolution military footage of an unidentified aerial phenomenon ever declassified. And it shows exactly what 4 naval aviators said it would. When Fast Eagle 03 and 04 trapped back aboard Nimitz, the recovery was eerily quiet. 2 unknown men in civilian clothes were waiting on the flight deck. They boarded the jets before the pilots could even unstrap, demanded the Fleur cassette from Underwood, and ordered every radar and mission tape pulled from both squadrons and the Princeton CIC. Fravre later recalled, They knew exactly what they wanted. No names, no badges, just hand it over. Within hours, every hard drive, mini DV, and radar log from the entire event had vanished into a helicopter bound for parts unknown. For 13 years, the incident stayed buried in black filing cabinets. Pilots were told, gently but firmly, not to talk about it outside the squadron. The tapes were never seen again. Then, on December 16, 2017, the New York Times published Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. Front page, above the fold. Alongside the article were two videos, FLIR 1 and the previously unseen gimbal clip. The accompanying story revealed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ADIP, a low-profile Pentagon office that had quietly studied unexplained aerial phenomena from 2007 to 2012, funded at Senator Harry Reid's request with $22 million in black budget money. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich went on the record for the first time. Fravor told CNN, "I have no idea what I saw, but I want the country to take this seriously." Underwood confirmed the FLIR 1 tape was his, unaltered. The Navy, caught flat-footed, issued a statement in September 2019. The footage is authentic and was captured by Navy aircraft. In April 2020, the Department of Defense formally released FLIR 1, Gimbal, and Go Fast with the terse caption, "The aerial phenomena observed in the videos remain characterized as unidentified." On June 25, 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence delivered its long-awaited preliminary report to Congress. 144 cases between 2004 and 2021. Of those, only one was explained, a balloon. The Nimitz encounter was singled out as the best documented modern case. Multi-sensor, multi-platform, trained military observers, and still unexplained. 17 years after a white oblong craft danced with two Super Hornets off San Diego, the United States government finally admitted on the record what the pilots had known since 2004. Something is operating in our airspace that outperforms anything in the human inventory, and we do not know what it is. The Tic Tac case did not end the debate. It simply moved the goalposts from "did it happen?" to "what do we do about it?" While the Tic Tac case made headlines, a quieter encounter half a world away had already been waiting in classified files for more than half a century. Tuesday, November 7, 2006. For 30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Chicago O'Hare is winding down from the late afternoon push. The sky is a flat, featureless gray, ceiling locked at 1,900 feet, light drizzle, temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit, wind calm. Inside Terminal 1, Concourse C, the usual controlled chaos, pushback tugs honking, belt loaders clunking, ground crew in neon vests and hearing protection shouting over jet blast. At Gate C-17, a United Airlines Boeing 777 bound for Charlotte is parked nose in. Engines off, jetway still attached. Ramp workers are finishing the baggage load, fuelers topping the wings, caterers swapping coffee urns. Everything is routine. A ramp agent named Mike, last name withheld in the FAA report, steps out from under the fuselage to light a cigarette. He glances up the way ramp workers do 100 times a day, just checking the sky for weather or inbound traffic. He freezes. Directly above the gate, maybe 1,500 feet above ground level, a perfectly round, metallic disc is hovering motionless beneath the cloud deck. It is gunmetal gray, highly polished, catching no light because there is no light to catch, just a dull, seamless oval against the overcast, perhaps 40 to 50 feet in diameter. No wings, no windows, no markings, no exhaust, no sound. Mike yells, "Hey, what the hell is that?" Within seconds, every ground worker within 50 yards is staring straight up. A fueler drops his hose. A baggage handler pulls off his ear protection. Flight crew on the jetway, passengers looking out the windows, Even the gate agent inside the terminal all see the same thing. The disc simply hangs there, rock steady, defying the low ceiling and the busiest airspace in North America. Downtown Chicago's skyscrapers are visible 20 miles east. Arrival and departure corridors are stacked overhead. Yet nothing moves near it. No jet blast disturbs it. No one hears rotors or engines. For almost 5 minutes, the disc hovers above gate C-17 like it is studying the airplane, the people, or the airport itself. Then, without warning, it happens. A perfectly circular hole punches straight up through the cloud layer, as if the overcast is solid and something just blasted through it. The disc shoots upward into the hole at impossible speed and is gone. The hole lingers for nearly 10 minutes afterward, edges slowly dissipating like smoke rings in the gray. The ordinary end-of-day rush at the world's busiest airport has just been visited by something that does not belong in any flight manual. The sighting at gate C-17 did not depend on one pair of eyes. Within 30 seconds of the first shout, at least 12 United Airlines employees, rampers, fuelers, mechanics, and baggage handlers were standing in the open, necks craned, staring straight up. They were soon joined by 2 pilots walking across the apron to their own aircraft and a gate agent who had stepped outside for a smoke. By the 2-minute mark, the crowd had grown to more than 20 people spread across 3 gates, C-15, C-17, and C-19, offering multiple angles and distances. Every single description matches. It was perfectly round, like a silver dollar held at arm's length. Completely smooth, no seams, no rivets, no windows, no lights. Gunmetal gray, almost matte, but you could tell it was metallic because the overcast reflected off it evenly. No sound at all. Even when we shut the APU down on the 777, we still couldn't hear anything. It never moved an inch for minutes, just hung there like it was nailed to the sky. A senior mechanic with 23 years at O'Hare, standing near the tail of the 777, later told the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, NARCAP. I had a clear view from below. It was maybe 1,400 to 1,600 feet AGL, definitely below the 1,900-foot ceiling. Size-wise, I'd say 45 to 50 feet across. The edges were razor-sharp. No blur, no heat shimmer, no props, no jet exhaust. It was the most solid thing I've ever seen that had no business being there. From gate C-15, 300 feet to the north, a ramp supervisor watched it in profile. He described a shallow disc, thicker in the center, tapering smoothly to a knife-edge rim. From directly underneath, the bottom appeared perfectly flat and featureless. 2 United pilots, one a 747 captain with 30 years, the other a 737 first officer, joined the group at the 3-minute mark. Both later filed separate written statements with their union safety office. The captain wrote, "It was a classic saucer shape, metallic, motionless, silent. I fly through this airspace every day, and I have never seen anything remotely like it. It was not a balloon, not a blimp, not a drone, not a hole in the clouds. Nothing we know can do that." Passengers inside the terminal began pressing against the windows. Several took blurry cell phone photos that show a dark oval against the gray ceiling. One passenger on the jetway recorded 30 seconds of video before the object departed. The duration estimates converged tightly. First sighted, 16 to 30 CST hover duration, 4 to 6 minutes. Most say closer to 5. Departure, instantaneous vertical climb. Every witness, independently interviewed by the FAA, United Airlines safety officers, and NARCAP, placed the object in the same spot, at the same time, with the same characteristics. No one reported seeing it arrive. Everyone agreed it simply was there, perfectly still, until it was not. A dozen aviation professionals, people whose jobs depend on correctly identifying everything that flies, watched the same impossible object from different angles, in daylight, under a low overcast, for minutes on end. Their testimony forms one of the most coherent, multi-witness, occupationally credible reports in the modern era. And not a single one of them has ever changed their story. Then, without the slightest warning, it left. Every witness who was looking at the 5-minute mark describes the same sequence, within a half-second of one another. The disc simply shot straight up. There was no tilt, no build-up, no visible exhaust, no sound, no blur of motion. One frame it was there, the next frame it was gone. Acceleration was effectively instantaneous, like a light switching off, only upward. The object punched a perfectly circular hole through the 1,900-foot overcast as it departed. The hole was the exact diameter of the disk, 40 to 50 feet across, with edges so sharp they looked laser-cut. Inside the tunnel, witnesses on the concourse and in the terminal lounges saw a column of clear blue sky and actual sunlight streaming down onto Gate C-17, a surreal spotlight in an otherwise gray afternoon. A United Ramp supervisor later told NARCAP, "It was like someone took a cookie cutter and removed a perfect circle of cloud. The edges didn't fray or drift. They stayed crisp for minutes." Passengers in the Concourse C lounge, 2 stories above the gates, watched the beam of sunlight move slowly across the floor as high-altitude winds gradually pushed the hole eastward. One traveler shot video showing the circular patch of blue sky slowly closing like an iris, taking nearly 14 minutes to dissipate completely. The departure physics are impossible by any known technology in 2006 or today. A conventional aircraft climbing from 1,500 feet to above the clouds, roughly 2,000 foot vertical, in under 1 second would require sustained acceleration of well over 100 g. Nothing with mass can survive that without disintegrating. A helicopter or drone would have produced visible rotor wash and audible noise. Neither was present. A missile or rocket would have left a condensation trail and a thunderclap sonic boom across half of Chicago. None did. Witnesses directly beneath the departure path reported only a slight momentary pressure change, like a fast elevator and a faint ozone smell. No shock wave, no wind, no sonic crack. The cleanly punched hole is the most photographed aspect of the incident. Dozens of cell phone images from multiple angles show the same perfect circle with sunlight pouring through. Meteorologists consulted by the Chicago Tribune and NARCAP confirmed that naturally occurring hole-punch clouds, fall streak holes, form over many minutes from ice crystal processes and are irregular in shape. This hole appeared in a fraction of a second, was geometrically perfect, and remained stable far longer than atmospheric physics allows. Whatever left Gate C-17 that afternoon did not gradually pierce the cloud layer. It displaced it, instantly, cleanly, and vertically at a speed no radar or human eye could track. And then it was simply gone, leaving only a circle of daylight in a gray Chicago sky and a dozen stunned aviation professionals who knew, without any doubt, that they had just watched something operate outside every rule they had ever been taught. By 4:45 p.m., the phones inside United Airlines O'Hare Operations Center were ringing off the hook. A ramp supervisor filed the first official report up the chain, followed quickly by 12 separate employee statements. Pilots, mechanics, gate agents, each describing the same metallic disc and its impossible departure. United management called the O'Hare Tower. Tower supervisor: "We saw nothing on radar, primary or secondary. No one called us about it." Chicago Tracon, approach control, confirmed the same. No unknown traffic, no transponder hits, no one working an unidentified target. The event was logged internally as Chi 2061-3, a routine miscellaneous entry. The FAA's official position came fast and firm. Chicago District Office spokesman Tony Molinaro told the Chicago Tribune on January 1, 2007, after the story finally leaked. It was obviously weather-related, probably a hole-punch cloud phenomenon. We have no investigation planned. No one from the FAA ever interviewed the 12 United employees. No one requested the cell phone photos or the passenger videos. No one asked for the exact time or the ceiling report that placed the object below the clouds. The case was closed before it opened. Yet internal FAA emails obtained years later through FOIA tell a different story. On November 8, 2006, the day after the incident, a Great Lakes Region duty officer wrote, "United ramp personnel report a metallic, elliptical object hovering below the 1,900-foot overcast at C-17 for approximately 5 minutes. Departed vertically through the cloud layer, leaving a clear circular hole. Multiple witnesses. No radar contact. Chicago Center has no traffic." Another email from FAA headquarters to the Office of Accident Investigation. Chi O'Hare sighting. 12 witnesses, all United employees. Object described as flying saucer. Requests for investigation denied per policy. Recommend no further action. A third from a security division manager. Calls coming in from Norfolk and media. Stick to weather explanation. Do not confirm any FAA knowledge of the event. The National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle received a direct call from one of the United pilots that same week. The taped conversation, later released, has the pilot saying, "The FAA knows exactly what we saw. They told our union safety rep it was nothing, but they're lying. It was solid, metallic, and it shot straight up through the clouds like a bullet." 12 trained aviation professionals on duty in broad daylight at one of the busiest airports on Earth reported an event that left physical evidence in the sky. The FAA's response was to pretend it never happened. The file stayed buried until the Chicago Tribune forced it into the open 2 months later. Even then, the official line never changed. Weather phenomenon, case closed. The hole in the clouds had a different opinion. The FAA's single offered explanation, a hole punch cloud, collapsed the moment anyone looked at the actual weather. A true fall streak hole, or hole punch cloud, forms when an aircraft flies through a layer of supercooled liquid water droplets at temperatures between 0 degrees Celsius and minus 40 degrees Celsius. Ice crystals nucleate, grow, and fall, leaving a circular void. The process takes 10 to 30 minutes and produces ragged, feathery edges. On November 7, 2006, at 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, O'Hare's official surface observation, KORD 072251Z, recorded. Temperatures 7 degrees C, 44 degrees Fahrenheit, dew point 1 degree C cloud layer OVC 019, 1,900 foot overcast, no altocumulus or cirrocumulus, no precipitation, no aircraft reported icing. There was no supercooled water layer anywhere in the column. The entire cloud deck was above freezing. National Weather Service senior meteorologist Gino Izzi later told the Chicago Tribune, "Conditions were completely wrong for a natural hole punch cloud. Temperature was too warm, no ice nuclei, no aircraft passage recorded at that time and location. The hole itself violated every known fall streak characteristic. Witnesses saw it form in a fraction of a second, not minutes. Edges were razor-sharp, not feathery. It remained stable for 10 to 14 minutes, far longer than typical fall streaks, which dissipate within 5. And sunlight streamed straight down in a perfect cylinder, something only a geometrically precise opening can produce." The most authoritative rejection came from NARCAP Technical Report 18, authored by former NASA senior research scientist Dr. Richard Haynes and a team of aviation safety experts. After analyzing the 12 United employee statements, passenger photos, weather logs, and radar data, the 2010 report concluded, the object was a structured, metallic, circular craft under intelligent control that IT departed vertically at extreme acceleration. The resulting hole was a direct physical consequence of that departure, not a meteorological event. There is no meteorological explanation that fits the observed facts. Dr. Haynes wrote, Eyewitnesses observed a solid object below the cloud base. The hole appeared simultaneously with the object's departure. To attribute this to a natural cloud phenomenon ignores temperature, timing, shape, sharpness of edges, and duration, all of which rule out fall streak formation. 12 aviation professionals watched a metallic disc hover for 5 minutes and then punch a perfect circle through the overcast in the blink of an eye. The weather that day could not, and did not, produce the phenomenon the FAA claimed. The hole in the clouds was not a weather event. It was evidence. From Chicago's towers, where a gray afternoon was briefly pierced by sunlight from another world, we travel 9 years forward to the carrier decks of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, where Navy pilots would film objects that performed the same impossible physics. Only this time the cameras never stopped rolling. Summer 2014. The Atlantic is warm and glassy off the Virginia Capes. USS Theodore Roosevelt, CVN 71, the Big Stick, is deep into her pre-deployment workup with Carrier Strike Group 12. For weeks, the nuclear carrier and her escorts have been steaming tight circles inside warning areas W-72 and W-386, a huge block of restricted airspace stretching from Cape Hatteras to 250 miles offshore, reserved exclusively for the U.S. Navy. On the flight deck, Carrier Air Wing 11 is flying round-the-clock cycles. F divided by a -18 divided by F Super Hornets from VFA, 11 Red Rippers, VFA, 31 Tomcatters, VFA, 213 Black Lions, and VFA, 32 Swordsmen launch every 90 minutes, practicing air-to-air combat, low-level strikes, and night carrier qualifications. EA, 18G Growlers from VAQ, 141 Shadowhawks prowl the edges, jamming simulated threats. 2D Hawkeyes from VAW, 125 Tiger Tails orbit overhead, painting the entire battle space on their big screens. This is home water. Every pilot, sensor operator, and controller has flown here hundreds of times. They know every radar return, every scheduled drone, every civilian airliner that skirts the edge of the warning area. Nothing enters W-72 or W-386 without the strike group knowing exactly what it is. Yet for weeks, something has been showing up that is on no schedule. It starts as faint radar ghosts on the Hawkeye scopes, contacts that appear at 30,000 feet, drop to 100 feet in seconds, then climb back to altitude without a transponder. At first, the air crews assume new classified drones or stealth tests. But the objects never coordinate with the exercise planners, never squawk the day's discrete codes, and never appear on the range safety brief. By early 2015, the encounters are daily. Pilots returning from sorties compare notes in the ready rooms, strange lights pacing them at night, metallic cubes inside clear spheres, objects that react the moment a radar locks on. The Roosevelt Strike Group is one of the most instrumented warships on Earth, surrounded by the most advanced fighters in the fleet. They are about to collect the clearest, most persistent evidence of unidentified aerial phenomena the modern military has ever recorded. And this time, the cameras will be running from the moment the jets leave the catapult. It was no longer a single weird day. By midsummer 2014, the objects were simply there. Every sortie, every cycle, every day. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, an F divided by a -18 F weapons systems officer with VFA, 11 Red Rippers, and later an F divided by a -18 E pilot with VFA, 143 Pukin Dogs, put it plainly in his 2019 congressional briefings and 2021 interviews. These things were out there every day for months. From the time we started flying in W-72 until we left for deployment in 2015, they were a constant presence. The pattern was eerily consistent. Pilots would launch, climb through 10,000 feet, and the E-2D Hawkeye would already have contacts holding between 11,000 and 25,000 feet, right in the middle of the training altitudes. The objects appeared as small, round returns on the APG-79 ASA radar, solid, high-confidence tracks that refused to squawk mode 3 or ADSB. When the Hawkeye passed the track to a Super Hornet, the fighter's own radar would lock instantly, painting a target the size of a weather balloon but with no heat signature and no predictable movement. Then the pilot would roll the ITFLR pod onto the bearing. What the infrared camera revealed was not a balloon. Most commonly, it was a white or light gray sphere, perfectly smooth, slightly translucent, like smoked glass or frosted acrylic. Diameter varied from 5 to 15 feet. They flew in loose groups of 4 to 6, sometimes in a perfect line, sometimes staggered like a diamond formation. No wings, no rotors, no exhaust, no control surfaces. The most striking variant, seen dozens of times, was a dark metallic cube encased inside a translucent sphere. The cube's corners almost touched the sphere's inner surface, leaving a thin, clear gap all the way around. Pilots described it as a black cube inside a clear beach ball. The sphere itself appeared to be the lifting body. The cube remained fixed in orientation even as the sphere rotated or translated. These objects held station for hours, drifting slowly against the wind, then suddenly accelerating to several hundred knots in any direction, up, down, sideways, with no visible propulsion. Graves recounted one sortie where a sphere flew in perfect formation off his wingman's 3/9 line for an entire 30-minute air combat maneuvering hop, matching every turn, every climb, every descent as if it were flown by a human pilot in the cockpit. Radar locks were effortless. The APG-79 would achieve firing quality tracks at 40 miles, yet the objects never maneuvered defensively when illuminated. They simply continued whatever they were doing. When a pilot attempted to close for a visual ID, the sphere or cube sphere would either hold position until the Hornet was within 2 miles, then gently drift away at 300 to 400 knots, or simply wink out, gone from both radar and FLIR simultaneously. No one ever heard a radio call. No one ever saw a contrail. No one ever recovered debris. By January 2015, the encounters were so routine that pilots stopped filing formal hazard reports and simply noted UAP on the squadron greaseboard. Graves later testified, "We had them on radar, on FLIR, and with our own eyeballs, sometimes all three at once." It went from "did anyone else see that?" to "who's got the cube today?" The training areas off the East Coast had become an open-air laboratory, and the objects were the permanent residents. April 27, 2014, 11 o'clock local. 2 VFA. 11 Super Hornets are in a standard close formation training engagement at 16,000 feet inside W-72. The flight lead, call sign Rogue, is flying left wing. His wingman, call sign Snoopy, is 1.5 miles right echelon. Both clean, no external tanks, practicing basic fighter maneuvers. Without warning, the Hawkeye controller breaks in on guard. Rogue flight, traffic 12 o'clock, 16,000, no squawk, type unknown. Both pilots look up from their HUDs. A white, smooth sphere, approximately 10 to 15 feet in diameter, passes directly between the two aircraft at combined closure speed of nearly 1,000 knots. Vertical separation, less than 100 feet from each jet. Horizontal separation, maybe 50 feet from each canopy. Rogue's pilot later told the Naval Safety Center investigator, "It came from above and between us so fast I didn't have time to flinch. I saw it clear as day. No wings, no tail, no exhaust, no markings. Just a perfect white ball that looked solid. My heart rate went to 180. Snoopy's pilot saw the same thing from the opposite side. It shot through the formation like a bullet. If we'd been in a left turn instead of right, it would have hit one of us." Both jets were rocking their wings and pulling 4 to 5 GS at the moment of passage. The object's flight path was arrow straight, level, and steady speed. Estimated 400 to 500 knots relative. No deviation, no wake turbulence, no sonic pop. The pilots broke off the engagement immediately and returned to Roosevelt. On the deck, the flight leader filed a formal hazardous airborne contact report, OPNAV 375018, classified priority. The report describes the object as 5 to 15 feet diameter white, non-luminescent spherical, no protrusions, no visible means of lift or propulsion passed between two aircraft with less than 100-foot vertical clearance. The Naval Safety Center logged the incident as a Category A near mid-air collision, the most serious classification short of actual contact. Recommended actions included mandatory UAP briefings for all aircrew and revised ROE for unidentified traffic in the warning areas. No radar recording of the object was recovered. It appeared and disappeared within the SPY-1 and APG-79 scan volumes too quickly for a classic pop-up target. However, the E-2D Hawkeye did capture a single primary return at the exact moment the pilot saw it, confirming the contact was not an illusion or shared hallucination. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, who reviewed the report, later testified, "That incident scared the hell out of us. We were doing 500 knots, 100 feet apart, and something with no transponder and no wings flew straight through the middle. One small timing difference, and we'd have lost 2 aircraft and 4 aircrew." After April 27th, the strike group quietly changed procedures. Fighters began flying with external tanks to extend loiter time. FLIR pods were kept hot on every sortie, and pilots were told to treat any non-squawking contact as a potential collision hazard first and a curiosity second. The objects never hit anything, but they made it unmistakably clear they could have. January 20th to 26th, 2015. The Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group is in its final COMPTUX off Jacksonville, Florida, the last graded exam before deployment. Every sortie is recorded, every radar scopes are archived, and the new /ASQ 228 V2 at FLIR pods are running on almost every jet. On January 21st, at 1912 local, a 2-ship of VFA 32 Swordsman Super Hornets is on a routine CAP station at 25,000 feet when the same airspace where the sphere almost collided with aircraft 9 months earlier. The lead pilot slews his pod 47 degrees left of the nose and locks onto a single bright object at approximately 20,000 feet, range 18 nautical miles. What the world now knows as the gimbal video begins. The object appears as an oblong, bright white shape against the cold Atlantic. No wings, no exhaust plume, no heat bloom. It is flying a racetrack pattern against the 100-knot prevailing wind. As the pod zooms to narrow field of view, the shape resolves into a classic upside-down gimbal, a flat, rounded rectangle with 2 small protrusions on the bottom, rotating slowly around its vertical axis once every 3 to 4 seconds. Cockpit audio crystal clear. Pilot 1. There's a whole fleet of M. Look on the SA. Pilot 2. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots out of the west. Pilot 1. Odd, look at that thing, dude. Pilot 2. It's rotating. The rotation is unmistakable. The object's long axis stays pointed into the wind, while the entire shape turns 360 degrees like a spinning top. No known aircraft can rotate independently of its flight path without banking or yawing. The pod's gimbal itself struggles to keep the target centered, causing the famous rotation artifact that is actually the object, not the camera. Princeton SPY-1 confirms a group of 4 to 6 contacts at the same position, no transponders, altitudes fluctuating between 18,000 and 24,000 feet. The gimbal object holds station for nearly 5 minutes before accelerating smoothly out of view. 3 days earlier, another Roosevelt section captured Go Fast. At 12:58 local on January 18th, a single seat F divided by a -18 from VFA. 11 is at 25,000 feet when the WSO in the trail aircraft spots a small object skimming the ocean. The pilot rolls the pod down and locks on at 6.2 nautical miles range. The footage shows a small, dark, spherical object racing left to right just above the waves. The ITFLR's rangefinder displays a steady 300 to 400 knots against a 120-knot headwind, altitude 100 to 200 feet AGL. Triangulation using the known wind speed and the pod's laser spot tracker later calculates actual speed at approximately 340 knots, 390 miles per hour, at sea level with no visible wake or spray. Pilot audio. Dude, that thing's hauling. It's going fast, bro. Look how low it is. The object maintains constant altitude and heading for the entire 44-second clip, never climbing, never slowing, never producing a rooster tail or condensation trail. It simply outruns the jet's ability to close before disappearing off-screen. Both videos carry full DoD metadata burned in. Date, timestamps, aircraft tail, numbers, GPS, coordinates, pod, azimuth, / elevation range to target counters. Chain of custody records show the original files were pulled from the jets, uploaded to the classified SIPRNet server on Roosevelt, and later transferred to the Office of Naval Intelligence. They remained classified until officially declassified and released by the Pentagon on April 27, 2020 under FOIA Case 2020-03 with the identical caption used for FLIR 1. The aerial phenomena observed in the videos remain characterized as unidentified. No edits, no compression artifacts beyond the original recording format, no debunking explanation ever issued. Gimbal and Go Fast are now the second and third pieces of confirmed U.S. military footage after FLIR 1, showing objects that perform outside any known aerodynamic envelope, captured in full daylight, with full sensor fusion by pilots who were there. The Roosevelt encounters did not end in 2015. The objects simply stopped being surprising. By the end of the 2014 to 2015 workup, the Roosevelt Strike Group had logged dozens of encounters, some daily, some multiple times per flight schedule. What began as cockpit curiosity, "Hey, did you see that thing?" quietly morphed into a recognized flight safety hazard. Lieutenant Ryan Graves and several squadron safety officers began compiling an informal database: dates, times, altitudes, radar tracks, FLIR clips, near-miss reports. When the near-mid-air collision of April 27, 2014 was added to 3 other close-pass incidents within 300 feet, the tone changed overnight. Pilots were no longer swapping stories. They were writing hazard reports. Graves personally briefed the Strike Group Air Wing Commander, the Roosevelt skipper, and finally Rear Admiral Mike Manazir, Commander Naval Air Forces Atlantic. He laid out the evidence: consistent radar tracks, FLIR footage, eyewitness accounts from 4 squadrons, and the indisputable fact that the objects were operating inside controlled military airspace with no coordination and no transponders. The Admiral's response, according to Graves: "This is now a safety of flight issue. Get it fixed." The reports climbed the chain. Copies went to the Naval Safety Center in Norfolk, to the Chief of Naval Operations Aviation Safety Directorate, and eventually to the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. None of the paperwork used the word alien. Every page used the phrase unidentified aerial phenomena posing potential collision risk. In March 2019, Graves, now out of the Navy, met privately with staff members of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He brought the Roosevelt Squadron logs, selected FLIR clips, and the near-miss package. The reaction was immediate. Senators wanted to know why naval aviators had been forced to treat these encounters as routine for years with no formal reporting channel. 2 months later, on May 1, 2019, the Navy announced a complete overhaul of its UAP reporting procedures. Omnivent's 3100.7D, quietly distributed to every aviation command, established standardized UAP sighting report format, direct submission to the Naval Safety Center, and Fleet Area Control and Surveillance Facility, removal of any stigma. Reports will be handled without fear of ridicule or reprisal. Mandatory inclusion in post-flight debriefs when safety of flight is affected. The instructions cited recent encounters by naval aircraft with unidentified aerial phenomena in controlled training ranges as the primary driver. Insiders confirmed the Roosevelt incidents were the decisive catalyst. For the first time in American military history, seeing something unexplained in the sky was no longer career risk. It was required reporting. The objects off the East Coast never went away. But after 2019, every pilot who saw one knew exactly where to send the footage and exactly who would listen. The Roosevelt's daily visitors had quietly forced the most powerful Navy on Earth to rewrite its own rules. When Commander David Fravor first saw the Roosevelt gimbal and go fast videos in 2018, he needed less than 10 seconds. That's the same thing, he told Ryan Graves over the phone. Same flight profile. Same lack of wings, exhaust, or sonic signature. Same instantaneous acceleration. Same intelligent reaction to our presence. 11 years and 3,000 miles apart, the Nimitz Tic Tac and the Roosevelt spheres/cubes were exhibiting identical performance envelopes. Hypersonic bursts without heat bloom, right-angle turns without banking, hovering against 120-knot winds, and the ability to vanish from sensors at will. The only difference was persistence. The Nimitz saw one object for 5 minutes. Roosevelt saw fleets of them for months. The Office of Naval Intelligence quietly classified the entire 2014 to 2015 Roosevelt dataset as a sustained series of unidentified aerial phenomena incursions in controlled U.S. training ranges. Portions of the raw SPY-1 radar tapes, full resolution at FLIR files, and E-2D Hawkeye data logs remain classified as of 2025. What has been released shows dozens of objects operating with complete impunity inside some of the most heavily monitored airspace on Earth. The pattern is now undeniable. From the 2004 Nimitz encounter through the 2014 to 2015 Roosevelt events to the present day, Navy strike groups have repeatedly documented objects that appear without warning at any altitude from sea level to 80,000 feet, accelerate and maneuver beyond known aerodynamic limits, defeat radar locks, yet allow visual and infrared tracking. Pod observations show no hostility, but display clear awareness of U.S. platforms, leave no debris, no wreckage, no explanation. These are not isolated anomalies. They are a sustained, technologically superior presence that has chosen to operate in close proximity to the most advanced warships and aircraft in the U.S. inventory for at least 2 decades. The Roosevelt encounters forced the Navy to stop treating each sighting as a one-off curiosity and start treating them as a single, ongoing phenomenon requiring formal safety protocols, intelligence collection, and congressional oversight. A decade after the last Roosevelt pilot watched a cube inside a sphere drift away against the wind, the U.S. policy finally caught up to what the flight crews had known since 2014. Whatever these things are, they have been here all along. As Roosevelt's encounters continued into deployment, another swarm appeared, this time returning to the same Pacific waters where the Tic Tac once played, and the cameras were still rolling. 15 years after the Nimitz Tic Tac, the same stretch of ocean is busy again. July 2019. The littoral combat ship USS Omaha, LCS-12, sleek, fast, and brand new, is operating 70 miles southwest of San Diego inside the restricted Southern California Range complex near San Clemente Island. The water is mirror calm, the sky clear except for a high marine layer at 10,000 feet. Omaha is running night surface group exercises with USS Russell, USS Kansas City, and several smaller vessels, practicing coordinated anti-submarine and missile defense drills. At 21:47 local time, the comm ends. The N/SBS 77 surface search radar on Omaha's bridge suddenly paints multiple uncorrelated primary returns. Small, fast-moving contacts at 500 to 1,000 feet altitude. No transponders, no flight plans. The Combat Information Center lights up with chatter. CIC Watch Officer. Multiple airborne contacts bearing 240. Range 25 miles. No squawk. Altitude fluctuating. Within minutes, the number climbs from 4 to 9 to 14. They are not aircraft on approach to North Island or Miramar. They are not drones from the island range. They are not scheduled players in the exercise. They simply appear, spread out in a loose swarm, and begin orbiting the task group at 8 to 10 miles distance. The objects are visible to the naked eye from the signal bridge, steady white lights with occasional red or green flashes, moving in perfect synchronization, never colliding, never drifting apart. No navigation strobes, no anti-collision beacons, no sound reaching the deck despite the quiet night. Omaha's captain orders the ship to general quarters quiet. Weapon stations go hot, but no one has rules of engagement for something that isn't shooting, just watching. By 22:05, the swarm has closed to 3 miles. Lookouts count at least 14 separate lights now, some descending to 200 feet above the water, others climbing above the cloud deck. The ship's new spherical array infrared camera, the same system later made famous in Pentagon videos, is already recording. The Pacific that once hosted a single white tic-tac is now hosting an entire fleet of silent visitors, and the Navy's newest warship is about to capture the clearest night vision evidence yet. The nights of July 15th to 17th, 2019, the Southern California coast belonged to someone else. 5 Arleigh Burke destroyers, USS Kidd, USS Rafael Peralta, USS John Finn, USS Paul Hamilton, and USS Russell, were conducting a scheduled surface action group exercise when the same phenomenon that had plagued the Roosevelt years earlier reappeared, only larger and more brazen. At 21:20 on July 15th, USS Kidd Spy 1D radar painted 6 primary contacts at 700 to 1,000 feet, orbiting the formation in a loose circle 8 miles in diameter. Within minutes, the count doubled to 14. All 5 ships confirmed identical tracks simultaneously. No spoofing, no single radar glitch. The objects were inside restricted military airspace, directly above the live-fire missile range. Deck logs across the task group read almost identically. 2,125 to 6 UAS sighted bearing 240, range 12 nm, altitude 800 feet 2138. Additional 8 UES joined, total 14. Maintaining station on task group point 2200. Visual confirmation by bridge lookouts. Steady white lights with occasional red/green flashes. No strobes point 2230. Objects descended to 300 feet above sea level, then climbed back to 1,000 feet, no sound detected. The swarm behaved with eerie discipline. When the formation executed a planned 30-degree turn to the south, every light shifted position to maintain perfect relative bearing, as if tethered by invisible lines. When Kidd increased speed to 27 knots to shake them, the lights accelerated without hesitation, closing to 3 miles before resuming their orbit. Snoopy teams on every destroyer rolled out night vision and long-lens cameras. Infrared footage later leaked to the public shows clusters of bright white orbs maneuvering in perfect synchronization, some descending to within 200 feet of the waves, others climbing above the low cloud deck and disappearing. No rotor wash disturbed the sea. No heat signature registered on the ship's infrared search and track systems. The encounters lasted hours. On July 15th, the objects remained until 1:12 the next morning. On July 16th, they returned at 20:47 and stayed until 23:59. On July 17th, they were back again from 21:10 until after 2 o'clock. Each night, the behavior was identical. Appear without warning, orbit the task group, mirror every course and speed change, then vanish as silently as they arrived. Bridge-to-bridge voice logs capture the growing frustration. Kidd, anybody have ID on these drones? Russell, negative. No flight plans, no comms, no nothing. Peralta, they're still with us. Just dropped to 100 feet off my port beam. Finn, same here. 14 lights, same as last night. This isn't a drill. No civilian vessels were within 50 miles. No scheduled drone tests were logged. The Navy's own MQ, 8 fire scouts and scan eagles were accounted for on deck. The objects were simply there, every night, every ship, for hours on end, inside some of the most tightly controlled airspace on the planet. By the third night, the task group commander ordered helicopters launched with flare pods. The swarm simply climbed above the cloud deck and disappeared from all sensors. The Pacific had sent a message. Whatever began with a single tic-tac in 2004 and continued with Roosevelt's daily visitors in 2015 had now escalated to coordinated, multi-night, multi-ship incursions directly over active U.S. warships. And the cameras never stopped rolling. At 23:11 on July 15, 2019, USS Omaha's Combat Information Center is bathed in the green glow of radar scopes and infrared displays. A single object has broken away from the main swarm and is now orbiting the ship alone at 500 feet, range 2 miles, glowing bright white on the shipboard night vision cameras. The Spherical Array Infrared System, SAIS, mounted high on Omaha's mast, is locked on. The object is perfectly round, approximately 10 to 15 feet in diameter, featureless except for a steady, non-strobing luminescence. No heat bloom, no exhaust, no rotors, just a silent, hovering presence. CIC watchstanders narrate in real time. TO, single contact bearing 235, range 1.8 miles, altitude 480 feet, speed 0. Holding station. Lookout. Visual on the bridge wing, bright white light, no navigation lights. Sensor operator. Confirmed on SAIS, solid track, no transponder, no IFF. For 6 full minutes the sphere drifts in a slow circle around the ship, occasionally rising or falling 100 feet as if adjusting for a better view. Then, without any acceleration curve, it begins a smooth, deliberate descent toward the black water. 22 hours, 17 minutes, and 32 seconds on the leaked video timestamp. The sphere drops from 500 feet to 50 feet in 4 seconds. No blur, no wake turbulence, no change in brightness. It hovers motionless 10 feet above the surface for another 3 seconds, the ocean beneath it perfectly undisturbed. CIC. It's right on the deck. Looks like it's going in. At 22 hours, 17 minutes, and 39 seconds, the sphere simply lowers the final 10 feet and touches the water. There is no splash, no white water, no luminescent wake. The glowing orb just merges with the surface and vanishes beneath it, the light dimming slightly as it submerges. TO, calm but stunned. Splash. Mark bearing 237, range 1.4 miles. Contact submerged. The ship's SQQ, 89 sonar suite, actively pinging for the submarine exercise, registers nothing. No cavitation, no propeller noise, no hull return. The sphere simply ceases to exist on every sensor the moment it enters the water. Omaha's captain orders a hard turn toward the entry point and launches the ship's rigid hull inflatable boat with a search team. For the next 40 minutes, the RHIB circles the coordinates under spotlight and flare. The ocean is empty. No debris, no oil slick, no thermal anomaly, no disturbance larger than the ship's own wake. The leaked 48-second video, first surfaced by Jeremy Corbell in April 2021, was quickly authenticated by the Pentagon. Spokesman Sue Goff stated, "I can confirm that the video was taken by Navy personnel and that the Department of Defense's UAP task force has included it in their ongoing examinations." Metadata burned into the clip confirms. Date: July 15, 2019. Time: 23:11 to 23:12 local ship. USS Omaha Sensor. SAIS, Spherical Array Infrared System. The object entered the Pacific at 32 degrees 36 minutes north, 120 degrees 12 minutes west, and was never seen again. No submarine contact was ever raised. No wreckage ever floated up. The swarm continued orbiting the task group for another 3 hours, as if nothing had happened. 15 years after the Nimitz tic-tac danced above the waves, the ocean finally accepted one of its visitors back. And the only evidence left behind was 48 seconds of authenticated U.S. Navy footage showing something the size of a small car quietly slip beneath the surface without a ripple. The Pacific kept it secret. The morning after the sphere vanished into the Pacific, the inquiries began, and quickly ran into the same wall every previous swarm incident had hit. Third Fleet ordered an immediate multi-agency investigation. The Coast Guard dispatched cutters and HC-130 Hercules aircraft to sweep a 200-mile radius. FBI field offices in San Diego and Los Angeles opened counterintelligence files. Naval Criminal Investigative Service teams boarded every ship in the task group for interviews and data collection. Automatic Identification System, AIS. Transponders were reviewed for every commercial vessel within 150 miles. Result: 0 ships within 60 nautical miles of the exercise area on any of the 3 nights. The nearest civilian traffic, a container ship bound for Long Beach, was 92 miles north and on a steady course with no drone launch capability. Helicopters with forward-looking infrared searched for mother ships, floating platforms, or high-endurance UAV catapults. They found nothing but empty ocean. Endurance alone ruled out 2019-era commercial drones. The objects operated continuously for 4 to 6 hours per night, in some cases returning the following evening, far beyond the 30 to 90-minute flight time of even the most advanced consumer or military quadcopters available. Battery swap or mid-air refueling was impossible. No support aircraft were ever detected. High-altitude winds that week averaged 80 to 110 knots from the west. Yet the objects held precise station or executed perfect orbits without drifting downwind, demonstrating active propulsion and station keeping impossible for lighter-than-air platforms. When challenged by helicopter searchlights or fighter radar locks, individual objects routinely accelerated to beyond visual range speeds in seconds, performance that would shred any known drone airframe. The investigation produced hundreds of pages of deck logs, radar files, infrared video, and witness statements from 5 warships. All of it was forwarded to the Office of Naval Intelligence and, later, to the Pentagon's newly formed Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. The UAPTF's preliminary summary, included in the June 2021 ODNI report, lists the July 2019 incidents under the heading Other Bin, cases that probably do represent physical objects, but lack sufficient data for positive identification. No threat assessment was offered. No foreign adversary was named. No domestic testing program matched the observed characteristics. The final line of the classified Navy after-action report, partially declassified in 2023, reads simply, "Origin, intent, and propulsion methodology and operational authority of the observed UES remain unknown. No vessels or entities recovered. Investigation suspended pending additional evidence." 6 years later, the files are still open. The Pacific is still quiet. And the only thing the most powerful Navy on Earth can say with certainty is that, For 3 nights in July 2019, something flew circles around 5 destroyers, sent one of its own beneath the waves without a trace, and left without ever identifying itself. The investigation didn't stall. It simply ran out of places to look. The 2019 swarm did not fade into footnotes. Every radar track, infrared clip, and declog entry was forwarded to the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARO, the Pentagon's post-UAPTF successor created by Congress in 2022. In ARO's classified catalog, the July 2019 events are listed as Case 20190-715, SoCal, 01 through 07, a multi-ship, multi-night, multi-sensor UAP series. Publicly, the office references them simply as the 2019 Southern California offshore incidents. During his April 2023 Senate testimony, ARO's first director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, addressed the case directly. We have multiple high-fidelity sensor recordings from U.S. Navy platforms showing small, spherical objects operating in restricted airspace for extended periods, demonstrating performance characteristics not consistent with known drone technology. One object is recorded submerging with no subsequent sonar contact. To date, we have found no evidence these were foreign adversary platforms, commercial drones, or U.S. classified programs. Kirkpatrick added that the incidents remain unresolved and are being used as a primary case study for improving sensor fusion and reporting protocols across the fleet. The files now live in ARO's secure database alongside Nimitz, Roosevelt, and the 2021 to 2023 transmedium cases. Cross-referenced metadata tags include transmedium travel sustained flight beyond known endurance, no detectable propulsion, signature intelligent formation behavior operation inside restricted military airspace without authorization. No balloons, no quadcopters, no foreign drones have ever matched the combined radar, infrared, visual, and acoustic profile. 6 years after a glowing sphere slipped silently beneath the Pacific in full view of a U.S. warship, the most advanced anomaly resolution office in American history still lists the incident as active. The investigation has not ended. It has simply moved from the bridge of USS Omaha to a quiet, windowless room in the Pentagon where analysts stare at the same 48 seconds of footage and ask the same unanswered question. What entered the water that night, and where did it go? As we near the end of tonight's journey through 10 of the clearest, best documented cases in the Black Vault archives, one quiet truth remains. The files are open, the cameras are still rolling, and the sky and the sea have not finished speaking. We began in the frozen silos of Montana, March 1967, when 20 nuclear missiles were silently switched off while red-orange lights hovered overhead. We moved to the night skies of Tehran in 1976, where two F-4 Phantoms lost their weapons and instruments the moment they tried to engage a blazing diamond that danced above the city. We crossed the Arctic with Japan Airlines 1628 in 1986, watching a walnut-shaped giant twice the size of an aircraft carrier pace a 747 for 50 minutes over Alaska. We stood in the pine shadows of Rendlesham Forest in 1980 as a deputy base commander recorded glowing objects beaming light onto NATO's nuclear storage bunkers. We flew over Phoenix in 1997, 1 mile-wide silent chevron gliding above an entire state while the governor watched in silence. We dropped to the Pacific in 2004 with Commander Fravor and the Nimitz Strike Group, chasing a 40-foot tic-tac that outran our best fighters and reappeared 60 miles away in a heartbeat. We lingered above O'Hare's Gate C-17 in 2006, where a metallic disc punched a perfect hole through the clouds and vanished upward in daylight. We circled the Atlantic with the Roosevelt Carrier Group in 2014 to 2015, surrounded daily by cubes inside spheres that nearly collided with our jets. Finally, We stood on the deck of USS Omaha in 2019, watching a glowing sphere descend without a ripple and disappear beneath the Pacific, while 14 others kept perfect station around 5 destroyers. 10 cases, 5 continents and 2 oceans. 52 years from Malmstrom to San Diego. Military pilots, commercial crews, radar operators, nuclear missile officers, air traffic controllers, and hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens. Evidence from every tool we possess: radar tapes, infrared footage, cockpit voice recorders, declassified memos, radiation readings, punched cloud layers, near-miss reports, and hours of authenticated video. The pattern is unmistakable. Every encounter shares the same hallmarks. Objects that appear and vanish without transition, instantaneous acceleration and direction changes, no wings, no exhaust, no sonic signature, transmedium travel between air and water, intelligent response to our presence, performance far beyond any known technology, then and now. And every case carries the same official fingerprint. Initial denial or silence, followed by partial admission, followed by the quiet label unexplained. No balloons, no weather, no drones, no adversaries have ever matched the combined sensor and eyewitness data. These are not stories. They are files, real, declassified, archived, and waiting for anyone willing to read them. We have walked through 10 doors the government once tried to keep closed. The view from the other side is calm, quiet, and vast. The sky has been speaking for a very long time. Tonight, we simply listened. None of what you have heard tonight would exist in public hands without one quiet, stubborn teenager who decided, in 1996, that the word classified should never mean forever. John Greenewald Jr. was 15 when he sent his first Freedom of Information Act request. Over the next 28 years, he filed more than 10,000 of them, hand-typed letters at first, then faxes, then emails, asking for one file at a time, one page at a time, one redacted paragraph at a time. When agencies stalled, he appealed. When they said, no records exist, he refiled with better wording. When they sent a single page with everything blacked out, he kept going until the black bars moved. Today, the Black Vault hosts more than 3 million pages of once secret documents. CIA, FBI, NSA, DJ, Air Force, Navy, Army, Department of Energy, even the State Department. Every case we explored tonight came from those pages. The original Malmstrom Command histories, the Tehran DI assessment, the JL-1628 radar printouts, the HALT memo, the Nimitz FLIR data, the Roosevelt safety reports, the Omaha infrared clip. All of them pried loose by a private citizen using nothing more than a law passed in 1966 and an unwillingness to accept no forever. The pattern inside those millions of pages is unmistakable. Time after time, agencies first denied the events entirely. Roswell was a weather balloon. Rendlesham was a lighthouse. Phoenix was flares. The Nimitz videos were drone tests. Then, years or decades later, the same agencies quietly released the documents that proved the denials wrong, often without comment, often with the most. We know what was seen. We have the radar tapes that watched 10 nuclear missiles blink off while glowing objects hovered overhead. We have the infrared footage of a 40-foot tic-tac outrunning Super Hornets. We have the night vision clip of a sphere slipping beneath the Pacific without a ripple. We have the punched hole in O'Hare's clouds, the walnut-shaped giant over Alaska, the diamond that turned Tehran's sky into a light show. We know who saw it. Colonels and commercial pilots, radar operators and ramp workers, destroyer captains and frightened families on rooftops. Trained observers whose job is to identify everything that flies, and who all reached for the same helpless words. I don't know what that was. We know it was measured. Spy, one-phased arrays, at FLIR pods, Geiger counters, Martello long-range radars, cockpit voice recorders, infrared search and track systems. Instruments that cost billions and are trusted with the defense of nations painted the same impossible signatures again and again. What we do not know is what it was. We do not know where it comes from. Another nation's secret hangar? Another dimension's open door? Another time altogether? We do not know why it appears over nuclear sites in 1967, over cities in 1997, over carrier strike groups in 2004, 2015, and 2019. We do not know whether its interest is curiosity, surveillance, warning, or something we lack the language to ask. We do not know if it is one intelligence or many, a single phenomenon wearing different masks, or countless visitors who simply sharing the same sky. Every file we open answers a dozen small questions and plants 100 larger ones. The mystery does not shrink with evidence, it deepens. The more clearly we see, the more vast the unknown becomes. And yet the pursuit continues. Every new FOIA release, every new pilot testimony, every new sensor record adds another careful brushstroke to a picture we may never finish. The questions are not a failure. They are the invitation. Tonight we have walked through 10 of the clearest windows we have into that larger reality. We close no doors behind us. We simply leave them open. The sky is still there. The ocean is still there. The files are still there. And somewhere, right now, someone is looking up, reaching for a phone or a radio or a notebook, and quietly beginning the next chapter we have not yet read. We don't have answers. We have something better: questions. And that, for now, is more than enough. Rest easy, friend. The wonder is safe with us. And so the first chapter of Black Vault Secrets draws to a close. 10 files, 10 nights, 10 quiet doors we opened together. We've drifted from the frozen prairies of 1967 to the warm Pacific of 2019, from the glow of a single tic-tac to entire swarms that watched our warships for hours. We've listened to colonels, pilots, and ramp workers speak the same calm, astonished words. I don't know what it was, but it was real. Tonight's journey is finished, but the vault is far from empty. In episode 2, we'll walk through 10 more windows. The Belgian Triangle wave that shut down F-16 radars. The Hudson Valley boomerang that flew low over New York suburbs for years. The Cash Landrum incident that left witnesses with radiation burns. The 1990 Montreal hotel rooftop photos. The 2008 Stephenville mass sighting that chased an F-16 formation. And cases still emerging from freshly declassified folders. The Black Vault now holds more than 3 million pages, and new documents arrive every week. Each one is another gentle invitation to look a little longer at the night sky and wonder, without fear, what might be looking back. If these stories have settled into your thoughts like a soft blanket of curiosity, please subscribe so the next set of files finds you the moment they're ready. Tap the bell. Leave a like if something tonight made you pause and stare at the ceiling a little longer. Share with the friend who also looks up when the stars feel close. The mysteries aren't going anywhere. They've waited decades, centuries, perhaps longer. They can wait until tomorrow night. For now, let the room grow quiet. Let the day's noise fade. Let the soft hum of these stories carry you wherever you need to go, wide awake with wonder or gently into sleep. You're safe here. You're among friends who understand that the unknown doesn't have to be frightening. Sometimes it only asks us to listen. Thank you for drifting with us through the Black Vault tonight. Until next time, let the unknown soothe you into sleep. Good night, friend. The stars will still be there when you wake.